Good evening, everyone. I will call to order this Tuesday, April 14th meeting of the Fairfield Plan and Zoning Commission. Just quickly before we get into our meeting minutes, Commissioner Capozzi has asked to be recognized for a moment, so I'll ask for that.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. Hello, my fellow commissioners. I'd like to take a moment to address a question I posed to Connecticut State Senator Wong in this room last week. On further reflection, I regret asking that question in this forum. It is my distinct honor to serve the town of Fairfield alongside each of the extraordinary commissioners with whom I am privileged to work. When my husband Jeffrey and I bought our home in Fairfield, we were welcomed into this community. We have always felt incredibly safe, seen, and supported here. That sense of belonging is one of the many reasons I felt called to serve our community through public office and why I work so hard to ensure Fairfield continues to be a welcoming and safe place for all. But I'm also still learning and doing my very best in this role for the people I am so privileged to represent. I intend to continue encouraging meaningful public participation and thoughtful civil discourse, because preserving everything we cherish about this beautiful community is a responsibility I take seriously. I will also continue working closely with our community and with this commission to ensure Fairfield keeps flourishing for generations to come. Thank you.
Commissioner Capozzi. Moving on to our meeting minutes, we have two sets of minutes for March 24th and April 7th. Do I have a motion on these two items? Commissioner? Yes. Do you have a motion on one of them?
I have a motion. The March 3rd minutes, I would like to, it's so long. Can we get a red line or a compare doc? Because
Third,
I'm sorry, March
24th.
Oh, 24th. We didn't do March 3rd yet. Okay, March 24th. It's long and I can't do a word by word analysis to see if it accurately is exactly what we approved, because I know we have a lengthy regulation and then we made a couple changes. So is it possible to get a compare doc of what was presented and what we have now, or a red line of what's in the regs now versus what this is? It's really hard
We had, I think we
to
had,
proof it.
oh,
I'm trying to proof
we
it.
had postponed this one just.
I know we did.
No, it was a question. I forget.
So that's really, I'm asking if we can table this or postpone this till next time. And if we can get some document that shows word by word comparison of this and the regulation that was proposed, or this and what is in the current regulations, because I can't go into a word by word comparison to see if it's accurate, you know. And before we pass minutes, and then this will then become part of our new regulations, I want to make sure there's nothing that could be at all off, off.
Commissioner Braun moves to postpone the March 24th meeting to our next scheduled meeting. Do I have a second? Or on hand seconds? So the request is just a red line of.
To get a red line. And I know we also made changes last time, but without going back and watching the whole meeting, I don't remember what they were exactly. And I just don't want to vote on minutes because that finalizes the regulation change. Then it goes into the master copy. I have another comment just in general, like I went to the, and thank you for giving us the link, Ms. Harrigan, to the updated regulation page. It's hard to tell from that which new regulations are in there and which are not in there. Is there a date that can be put in there so we know, we passed the parking regulations. But actually, I think those are in the minutes we haven't approved yet, right? Is that March 3rd? Yeah, so actually if we didn't approve March 3rd minutes, then are the parking regulations in the master regulations now?
Yeah, you approved the March 3rd meeting
did?
minutes at a prior meeting,
Oh, okay. So
the 10th.
just to make sure we all know so everyone has to know so how do we know when the regulations are ready to be put in the master book? Like they have to be noticed, there has to be a public notice, there has to be an appeal period, of what we passed in our meeting. Does that happen after we approve the minutes or before we approve the minutes?
No, it happens after the meeting. So if you take a vote on something, it is standard procedure.
Okay.
Sometimes for whatever reason, we can't make a deadline because there's a holiday date or
Okay.
something like that, but the standard procedure is if we have decisions that are made on a Tuesday, those go into into the paper the next day with an effective, it runs on the Friday with an effective date of the very next day, which is generally a Saturday. And then any appeal period runs from that Saturday effective date, 15 days after that. And then we incorporate it into the main regulation book. So we
So
do wait that period of time just in case.
it would be at least 2 weeks or a little more from when we vote to approve a regulation before it becomes effective. Because you have to wait the appeal period and the notice period, the notice in the newspaper.
Yes and no. I mean, I've talked to Attorney Peers about this with other regulations. Even if a regulation gets appealed, if there's no stay for the regulation, it's still in effect. If it gets overturned, then it's overturned. But as you know, this commission has fairly broad authority. So, you know, his advice to staff has been, if the commission adopts it, you can wait the appeal period, you can put it into your regs. You know, it's really effective unless and until, if that should occur, it gets overturned by a court.
And just because I was reading the statute on passing regulations, we're supposed to state our reasons for passing the amendment on the record. And also, we're supposed to set an effective date. So I guess if we don't set an effective date, does that mean it's effective immediately? We probably should say when it's going to be effective, and if it's immediate, it would be immediate. It should probably be stated. That's just an aside. So basically.
Reasons said.
Pardon me?
Where are the reasons said?
Well, the reasons have to be stated when you approve a modification to our regulations. I suppose you could say, you know, people's discussion could be considered a reason, but it seems.
I think a lot of the commissioners tend to state reasons in their deliberation, like it's consistent with the work that they did in the POCD or, so I think there are findings that are made amongst the discussion amongst the commission as that's being deliberated.
So right now, of the regulations we passed this year, the parking regulations we passed on March 3rd are in the master policy, the master regs that are on the town website under the zoning department,
That's correct.
not zoning commission, zoning department, town plan and zoning department. And we call them walkability, I call them density, the new regulations that are in the minutes of March 24th, those are not in there yet, or are they?
They're not, but
Okay,
they should be incorporated this week.
because it's been a couple weeks, and even if we don't approve the minutes, it can still go in there. Okay, so,
Correct.
so you were obviously already working on putting them in the master copy, right?
Yes, one of our staff assistants is doing
Another
that.
question, and I appreciate the time. When the zoning map changes, like if we do these parking mitigation districts, do we do that, or is that supposed to do that? Because that zoning map is probably hard to change, I imagine.
We have a contract with the Metropolitan Council of Governments
Okay.
to work on zoning map revisions for us at this time. It is the hope that we'll have a GIS staff person who hopefully will be hired in the next fiscal year that has been requested by the DPW department, who can then take over, you know, both plan and zoning's GIS requests as well as other departments townwide.
Because when we pass individual zone changes for projects, is that in there? Like, how do we know that?
We recently had MetroCog update the zoning map because we realized that there were quite a few map changes that we hadn't incorporated because we frankly don't have a GIS staff person. So we had asked them to kind of catch us up. There's a newly updated zoning map on the website that you'll see is slightly different in style than the prior map, but includes those most recently adopted map changes outside of some of the 830G applications that we're gonna consider overlays.
I appreciate that. I have a question about tonight's. Can you just, maybe we don't have to table it, but there was a change we made to what we originally was being proposed for these regulations from March 24th. Do you remember what that change was? Because at the time, I didn't feel we should vote on something that had a substantive change to what we published ahead of the hearing. but I don't remember what it was now, because I didn't go back and listen to it. Does anyone remember? I'm just trying to
It
understand
was
what.
a slight height change to the neighborhood design district from 30 feet to 40 feet to be reflective of the residential zoning that most commonly surrounds that commercial district. It's very comparable to the height for those neighborhood design districts.
Thank you.
Commissioner Randolph.
Just thank you for explaining the steps. What's the map of record? Is it MetroCop's map or is it our published PDF map?
It's our published PDF map but the two are obviously maintained together. So that's part of the reason why we asked them to update it and change it so that when you go into the online GIS system, that reflects what our PDF static zoning map is as well.
So the MetroCop's map that we,
So that's.
the MetroCog's map that we use and I use it during the meeting all the time, that is up to date.
Yes,
Okay. So that map that we have access to is effectively the map of record.
yes, well, yes,
It reflects the map of record.
correct.
Okay, thanks.
And just, Ms. Harrigan, I'm second guessing myself on whether we should postpone this. So this is what is being put into you've proved it yourself, right? So this is what we proposed, except for that one little change.
That's correct.
So this matches that. So I think I'm gonna rescind my motion. Yeah, withdraw my motion.
Do you want to?
I just want to make sure it's accurate.
New motion?
Yeah. I'm gonna withdraw my motion to,
Postpone.
Yeah.
You want to make a new one to,
Pardon me?
you want to make a new motion in place?
I'll make, motion to approve.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Braun moves to approve the March 24th minutes. Do I have a second? Commissioner Delgado seconds. Anything further on that? Commissioner Delgado, any other questions, comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve the March 24th minutes, please raise your hand or say aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And then the April 7th minutes, can I have a motion on that item, please? Commissioner Braun.
I move to approve them with one correction. The correction is in the section of the April 7th minutes that talks about the parking. We had 4 zoning regulations that we went through and regulation text amendment. And the one that talked about the parking mitigation district, it mentions that there is a proposal, we discussed 2 of them. So if we discussed sort of a broad discussion of what staff proposed and also what Commissioner Monahan and I proposed. I think both, if we're going to reflect one discussion, all discussion should be in there. So this says, oh, this also says Chairman Noonan on here.
I was reading that.
So where it says, Ms. Harrigan explained the discussion was continuing from the previous 2 meetings on the, I'm sorry, parking mitigation district. So where it says, to the 2 areas under consideration includes a portion of Southport and portions of Fairfield Center extending northerly to the west of Fairfield University and south to Residence B Zone along Reef Road. That is 2 sections, 4% of the town's landmass each, which are the areas where, we are allowed to do under the new housing law to preserve some parking from what I call the 15-unit parking ban. But we also discussed what Commissioner Monahan and I had also emailed to this commission earlier, 2 slightly different zones, which would really encompass all of the post road. So I feel like if we're going to talk about those 2, we should also put the other 2 in the minutes, either put none of the minutes or put all the proposals that we discussed in the minutes. So my proposal would be that there's almost not, I wouldn't call them dueling proposed parking mitigation districts, but there are 2 sets of 2 parking mitigation districts that are under consideration. And, more can be submitted, I suppose. There's a lot of public interest in this. And I think the minutes should reflect, that there's more than just that's being discussed. Was there a second on that motion to?
Commissioner
Okay.
Bode seconds. Did you want to propose specific?
Yeah, we just propose that we add language saying there are actually 4 areas under consideration, or more. And because the hearing is open, we could get more, but, and those two are mentioned, and then you might want to just for people to be able to understand what it is, those were proposed by zoning staff and two others proposed by Commissioners Braun and Monahan, that, because our stuff is it's up, posted on the website. Rather than me try to describe it, it's a circle, we put around certain areas to encompass all of the post road from basically South Benson to Southport, more or less, yeah. And parts of the beach area as well.
Commissioner Capozzi, you good with that?
Yes, yes.
I'll just add, can I make another friendly amendment? There's also a minor, I already raised this, but under the first of the new public hearings, we just need to add that hearing was closed. There doesn't indicate one way or the other.
You're talking about the
Lighting
pool,
standards,
the pool?
the lighting standards.
I'm sorry, which one? Oh, the lighting standards? That was closed, okay.
Yeah, we just need to add that language.
Yeah,
So I would suggest an amendment to that effect.
okay. So I'll add that to my amendment.
Commissioner Capozzi, okay with that?
Yes, of course.
So the only one open is the parking mitigation districts.
Correct.
And just not part of, it's appropriate to,
Fences and walls closed, fences and walls are closed too?
I know we did not,
it says closed under fences and walls. I don't think we closed that, did we?
Closed it.
We closed it?
There's,
We did.
leave it.
I was going by the minutes.
It should stay open.
Closed.
Well, we can't change it. I mean, we could change the minutes. We can't change
What we did.
what we did. We could reopen it, but that wouldn't be, yeah.
So were we waiting
I
for
think
more
if-
information?
Okay,
Sorry.
I think we closed it. But as you and I have discussed.
Subject to further
subject to
changes
further
that could
changes,
potentially reopen it.
which will reflect some of the comments at the public hearing.
Right.
And will address the underlying regs.
But that gets back to the point I made last time, which is this commission has historically not voted on text amendments that are changed substantially from what we published in the notice before the public hearing. That's, to me, supposed to represent what the public anticipates us adopting. And if we make substantive changes, we should re-notice it with that revised language. That's how we've always done in the past, but.
It's the intention. That's
So
what's
you're
gonna be
saying
done.
that, well, you have to re-notice with the new language then?
Yes.
And we don't have the new language yet, so
Not
that'll
yet,
take a little,
But that'll
okay.
take a little.
We'd have to reopen it.
We don't have to reopen it. It'll just be a new
Oh,
proposed text amendment, which will be different.
So
So,
then that will be open for public discussion.
Exactly.
Okay.
so that's just fences. Pools is closed though, right?
Pools is closed, yes.
They're both closed. But there are things,
Okay.
it'll be changed.
And then again, for the parking mitigation districts, I'm very concerned because apparently once, I believe the steps are, and maybe Director Harrigan can educate us. I believe the steps are, once we adopt those parking mitigation districts, which again are each of them 4% of the land mass of our town, where we can require parking. Otherwise, up to 15 units of multifamily, we can require 0 parking anywhere in town. So there's 2 sets of 2 that we have all proposed, but once we adopt whatever those districts are, they don't become effective until they are submitted to the State Office of Policy and Management, and then they have 90 days to review and potentially approve or not approve. Is that then how does it work? You could explain, yeah.
No, I mean, I think the guidance is still coming out on that, but an informal conversation with staff at OPM indicated that the requirement is to notify OPM if we adopt them. They are not going to review or deny an action by this commission.
Good, that's great. So then the only real deadline we have is July 1st. I have no idea if any application, I think I asked that last time. We don't know of any applications coming in for 15-unit multifamily that could not have adequate parking or less, like up to 15 unit, because so far we don't know of any, but yeah. So that's the concern, that we should be pushing that ahead of other things, because that gives us, the leeway to have parking. And also, I think we should do some more research to figure out what business owners feel like. I feel like I'd like to hear from them. And is there a way we could do outreach with them before we have to vote on this? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, I think we can have that discussion, but I think we need to keep this. a little
Well, the hearing's
focused
still
on-
open, so-
Yeah, but this is really, we're veering out of discussing the content of the minutes at this point.
Okay, so we're,
So table.
okay, so for minutes, I'm done, but I do want to raise that point again about how we're going to pursue that without, with being adequately informed and making sure it gets on agendas. So we don't get to July 1st without having something that people want.
So the current minutes should reflect that. We discussed that in this meeting.
Well, the current minutes should be modified to reflect what we discussed last
Rather
time.
than the minutes of this meeting should reflect, we
Right,
discussed that.
but for now, we're just talking about.
Yeah, so we could raise that after.
So currently, the motion is to approve, but with the amendments that, as previously stated.
Okay, correct.
Any further comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve with the amendments as stated, please raise your hand. Opposed? Oh, did you raise?
I just want to see how it reads. So I guess we can see a copy of it.
Before you vote?
I mean, unless we're just gonna approve something and
Well,
vote
Commissioner-
without knowing what we're really gonna, the verbiage.
Well, so the verbiage would be what we just voted on. 2 areas of, maybe 4 areas under consideration include Southport, Fairfield Center, and that as proposed by staff, and 2 other areas on the post road as proposed by Commissioners Monahan and Braun. Is that accurate? Okay, I think that's accurate. And then the other correction is Chairman Corsillo instead of Chairman Noonan, and then the fence thing was closed, so that would.
No, yes, the other one, that there's nothing indicating whether or not the lighting standards one was closed. We just need to add the language indicating that was
Okay,
closed.
so those are the amendments, and if we want to ask for.
Right, great.
Okay, great.
Okay, all those in favor say, raise your hand. Say aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next up is an 824 review request by the Conservation Department to consider a donation of title marshland property for permanent open space at 561 Center Street. And I believe our Conservation Director, Tim Bishop, is on remotely to talk through this.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Tim Bishop here, Conservation Director for the town. Thank you for taking the time to look at this potential donation. Recently was approved for acceptance by the Conservation Commission. And unfortunately, the Land Acquisition Commission was supposed to meet to review this prior to your meeting, but that got postponed until the end of the month, so I don't have their input yet. But it's before you tonight as a small parcel for donation. If you know this area, Center Street, it's on the corner of Center Street and the on-ramp to I-95. It's mostly tidal marsh and possibly some inland wetlands. It's 0.17 acres, and I was approached by the current owner to donate it. It's not obviously not a huge piece, but it does have natural resources that are of interest to me and the Conservation Commission. And my thinking really is that it could be street access to potentially future acquisitions of the adjacent marsh and marsh system. We do have nearby open space further down towards Westway. We have over 4 acres down there, so more of a strategic acquisition with really, no downsides. I did put in the memo too for anyone that is interested what the financial ramifications are. I believe it's a little over $700 a year at this current tax position and loss. And there are some back taxes owed, but I just wanted to bring this before you tonight for a discussion and hopefully a vote for approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Commissioner Braun.
Do we take it subject to them paying the back taxes, or do we give them of the back taxes? Or is that
In the past, the tax collector and the town attorney have waived those delinquencies as part of the transition of title to the town.
And is this, we've collected a few other parcels in this general area of Southport. Is this contiguous to that or close by to that? I don't remember the exact addresses, but it was over the last year or two.
That's correct. Those were part of the Westway open space additions that were nearby and hydraulically connected. Again, of interest to me. And they're, I would say, maybe less than a half a mile without measuring, but very close.
So it's part of the same sort of wetland system, even if it's not directly abutting?
Exactly.
And that helps with, would you say habitat, flood control, all the benefits of tidal wetland?
Yeah, I mean, this parcel's so small, it's hard to really quantify the benefit other than, taking advantage of a donation. But like I said, I think strategically, I've spoken with Director Harrigan about, some future parcels that I'm looking at that would connect all of these. And probably I'll be back before you with some discussion on regulation revisions to make that happen. But since it is hydraulically connected and does have street frontage, I think that's an advantage to get the ball rolling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Commissioner Randolph?
Mr. Bishop, thanks for presenting this to us. Did we do a phase one and a phase one on this? Environmental?
No, I would see no reason for any due diligence on this parcel.
So we're confident there's no toxic materials that's been dumped on the site?
Yeah, I would feel confident looking at historic aerials back to 34 that this corner was not not a industrial or commercial site with any hazardous materials.
And then also, I'm just looking at the parcel viewer. So it looks like Pequot Landing owns all the property to the south as part of that. Is there a conservation easement on that property?
There is.
Okay. Which is an easement, so it doesn't show in the viewer.
That's correct.
Thanks.
That's the title marsh I was alluding to. I think that would be a area of acreage. It's a little over 4 acres that would be worth pursuing with the HOA and this commission.
Commissioner Levy, did you have your hand up?
I was just gonna make a motion.
Okay. Any other questions before? All right, and the motion on this would be for a positive referral.
Recommendation to the Board of Selectmen.
Just one last
Well,
question.
hang on, we have them. I'll get to you in a second. So Commissioner Levy moves to make a positive referral to the Board of Selectmen. Do I have a second on that? Commissioner Monahan seconds. Anything further?
Just based on Mr. Bishop's recommendation and the proximity to the Westway area, I think this would be to the benefit of the town.
Thank you, Commissioner Monahan. Commissioner Randall.
Yeah, Mr. Bishop, sorry, one last question. It looks like, I'm just looking at the area viewer. It looks like there's an encroachment on the property. I don't know if that's accurate or not.
I don't think we'd have to look at that before we take title, but I don't think that's accurate as far as the lot line.
Okay, so, yeah, I'm just looking at the viewer right now and it shows the driveway for 579 encroaches on 561. So make sure we get that straightened out. So
Yes, thank you.
thanks.
Any further comments? All those in favor of the motion to make a positive referral to the Board of Selectmen, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Bishop.
Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
Next is 250 Pequot Avenue, a request to consider a purchase of offsite below market rate dwelling units per section 31.7.j. Name Attorney Purcell.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Good to be before you tonight. Share my screen, John, if I can share. Hang on. Okay, great. Okay, so Chair Commissioners, again, good to be before you, full house, seems like. For this request, really kind of seeking your guidance. This is for 250 Pequot Avenue. I'm here on behalf of the property owner for your units in lieu amendment, which I will go through. We are looking to designate units off-site in lieu of the on-site units at 250 Pequot. So 250 Pequot Avenue was approved for an 18-unit for sale condo development with 2 affordable units. And we're discussing a regulation. It's actually a regulation that's yet to be used. I proposed it. We spent many hours discussing it. And so we're now here looking to proceed under it. For those of you who weren't on the commission at the time, I'll try to give a brief synopsis of what we discussed there. So section 30.7.j.1 of the existing regulations allow an applicant to potentially designate units off-site from a project they are developing to be restricted as affordable in lieu of on-site units within the development being restricted affordable. So rather than 2 units on-site, they would be units off-site. The regulation is limited to developments that contain units for sale. This regulation is not for rental developments, but it does not restrict whether the off-site affordable units would be for rental or sale. The on-site ones would have to have been for sale, but the off-site could be rental or for sale. The decision whether to accept these off-site units is at the discretion of the commission. The commission may also approve that these off-site units be conveyed to the town, a town-related entity like the Fairfield Housing Authority, or a nonprofit housing provider. And we specifically discussed at the time of the amendment, Habitat for Humanity. They're doing a lot of work within the town, and it's who we ended up discussing this with. There would then also be the opportunity when you designate an offsite unit to further restrict those units in terms of affordability. So for instance, 250 Pequot Ave is currently approved for 2 restricted affordable units for families earning 80% of median income. So if Habitat for Humanity, for example, were to be conveyed an offsite unit in lieu, the restriction could increase to 60% of AMI or even 40% of AMI. That would not only make it more affordable to the future homeowner because it, reduces the cost of the sale, but it also secures the town more HUE points, the housing unit equivalency points that go towards your next moratorium. The final key in the regulation is that the restriction required on the initial development would have to be released simultaneously with the recording of the restriction of the offsite unit. And that was done so that there would be no delay in the town receiving the HUE points. You would get them at the same time that you would have gotten them if the initial development had proceeded. So that's the basics of the regulation. Quickly on the why of this regulation, there are not many for sale affordable units in town. And one of the reasons is there's a particularly difficulty for those units within a large condo development. While the affordable restriction controls the price of a unit for sale, it controls that sale price, and it can factor in things, the price can change based on mortgage payments, taxes, and current common charges, heat and utility costs. It's just controlling the sales price. So a family that qualifies could buy it, and then the condo raises common charges, or there's a special assessment by the condo association for all the units, and it wouldn't apply there. And so somebody could end up in a difficult situation where they got in and they got the unit, but then they couldn't afford to keep the unit. Which is totally different from a rental situation, right? Because there's this continuous monthly transaction that happens, and that payment regularly takes into account housing costs, and it can be adjusted based on that. Again, when it's for sale, it's really one point in time until the resale. And on a lot of these developments, the affordable units only comprise 10% of the total units. So they are vastly outnumbered by the market rate units. That issue could be rectified if instead the units were designated off-site, particularly if it was a two-family, which is what we'll be discussing today. And now both units are affordable, and they basically share a 50-50 vote. So they control, the two affordable units control 100% of the condo rather than 10. Then there are also some advantages with conveying those units to a group like Habitat for Humanity. This is actually something I didn't discuss when I was doing the amendment. And one of the obvious areas is that this is their area of expertise. They specialize in affordable home ownership for families. They have, in talking with them, they basically have a list ready to go of people who are looking, for units like this. But two, which is the part I didn't bring up previously, and it's probably most important, is that they sell these homes with 30-year interest-free mortgages. So that is also a tremendous benefit to these families, besides just the reduced costs. And again, for the town, there's the increase in the HUE points. So this regulation was approved, and by the way, it had a favorable recommendation from the Affordable Housing Committee. But when we had the discussion on the regulation, we also had some discussions on the difficulty that might arise in the actual process when this came about, as in finding the units, getting them under contract, and then getting the commission to approve the offsite designation in a market that moves extremely fast. So that's kind of why we're here for your guidance. We're now looking to move forward with it, but we are dealing with the speed of a fast market. So to get into some of the specifics regarding this proposal, again, 250 Pequot Avenue was approved for an 18-unit for sale condo development, which required 2 of the units to be designated as affordable for those earning 80% of AMI. I put this chart up there, which hopefully you can see better over here. Yeah. So those units were earned the town a total of 2 HUE points because, as you can see, owned family unit restricted households earning no more than 80% of median income is 1 point. And then there's 2 units, so 2 times 1, you get 2 total points. Some really stellar math over there, but yeah, so for the reasons I just stated, in practicality, these units could be exceptionally difficult for affordable units to actually afford once they purchase a unit. So my client, the owner of 250 Pequot Avenue, reached out to Habitat for Humanity, and they agreed they would accept offsite affordable units. And again, typically they sell their homes to families with a restriction of 40% to 70% of AMI. We discussed the point system with them, and they were willing to sell them to families earning 40% of AMI.
With 2 points each then, right?
So yeah, again, I
4
did
points,
this, yeah, more stellar math. 4 years at prep, I can handle two units at 2 point per unit. You would double the amount of points you
And
would
that's
receive.
ownership for the offsite?
That would be ownership. Yeah, because Habitat really specializes in ownership. Again, paired with that interest-free mortgage. Yes. Yeah. Well, I got more to go, but I'm happy to answer a question.
Yeah, well, I've got a few questions, so
Sure.
why don't you finish your.
All right, well, actually, so with that, again, we've talked with Habitat, we've worked out kind of how it would go. We've been monitoring since that time 2-family dwellings that have come for sale. And so with that, I was going to ask Andrew Whiteley, he's a realtor here in town, to talk about the market. So Andrew, if you want to come up and just you have to state your name and address for the record. And then if you can describe what you've seen as far as two-family dwellings on the market, their location and basically how quickly the market's moving.
Sure. So Andrew Whiteley, I'm a real estate professional with Brown Harris Stevens in Southport. My address is 167 Old Post Road in Southport. I've been hired by Summit Development to market not only 250 Pequot Avenue, but also to look into trying to locate, identify a suitable multifamily. Do you have the slides?
Yeah, so they're seeing the active
perfect.
one now.
Active right now, this is basically reflective of what's currently going on in the larger single-family market. Because right now, I think this morning, there were 53 homes for sale in the town of Fairfield, single-family homes. This time of year before COVID, there'd be closer to 300 or 400 homes. There are currently only 5 active multifamilies for sale. The one on Marble Terrace is actually coming soon, so it's not effectively on the market yet. When you look at the closed, just over the last 6 months, you can see the condensed days on market. So the most desirable units tend to sell in the first couple days. You can see there's several that are sold in the first week, and the average market time is less than a month. So one of the concerns we had is when we brought things to Summit before, by the time the deliberation goes back and forth, it's already gone. So that's, I think, what I was asked to come and speak to today.
And I note here on this, Andrew, see Tungus Hill a lot and in the areas of town that we're really seeing these two-family dwellings.
Correct, and that's just the geography of where multifamilies, there are very few there are none in Southport Village, very few in Southport. They tend to be more in Tungus Hill, University area, and the center of town.
Commissioner Braun.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Whiteley, how much are you planning to sell the units at 250 Pequot Avenue for?
The pricing hasn't been set yet, but they're between the high 1s to high 2s.
So it could be like $1.9 million, 2 million.
Correct.
And the average here is for the two families, about 650 to.
Those are one side of, that's one side of the
That's
building.
one side of
Oh,
it.
that's one side.
Yeah, so you would double those numbers.
So each of those would be about a 1.2 million.
Yes, and some of those, the ones you'll see that sell in the shortest period of time are the ones that don't need a lot of renovations. The ones that seem to linger on the market actually do require significant renovations, and certainly that's something that's been factored.
Now, Chris, as far as somebody with an 80% income, their sales price would probably be in the neighborhood of about 300,000.
I believe it's over 300,000. It might be mid 300, I believe. I don't know the exact number, but yeah, I think it's in 300s.
So by by getting out of these two units, 250 Pequot stands to save about $3 million.
Well, you would still have to build the units, and then there's the cost of acquiring these other units.
And my point is, if you sell 2 units at market rate, you're going to make about 4 million, correct?
If they sell to market rate. Yeah.
And if those units remain at 80%, affordable units, you will gain about 800, get about 350, 700,000.
Yeah.
Right, so the developer stands to gain over $3 million, $3.5 million by going.
Less the, whatever the offsite would be, the offsite would.
No, I'm just talking about what his gain is. Forget about what he puts into the offsite. What he stands to gain by selling these at market rate rather than having them as affordable is about 3.3 million is what the developer saves, correct?
It's the difference in the sales price, correct?
Yeah.
And yes.
Right. So he saves 3.3 million by not having to have on-site affordable units. We'll sell them for about 2 million each, right? And what you're proposing is roughly about 2.5 million there. Is that correct? I mean, my question is, are you prepared to go, let's say, put about 3.5 million into the offsite units?
I don't think we wouldn't put 3.5 million into the offsite units, but again, I think we are locating offsite units in what is a better setup for the affordable unit owners. The town gets more points and the town gets more points as well. And we're assisting Habitat with that as well.
I mean, a lot will depend on what the numbers are. You know, as far as you know, when you come down the road, as to, you know, whether it be, I mean, are you contemplating trying to identify and quickly move on two properties? Bring that to our attention?
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the guidance that we're looking for. I mean, again, we're looking to acquire a two-family, and designate both units, as affordable. The area that these are coming up in is Tungus Hill, in the center of town. There is not much availability, as Mr. Whiteley was speaking to, in the Southport area. And so that's the area that we're targeting for it. And again, we would increase the restriction with those two offsite units.
They would be in perpetuity.
They'd be in perpetuity.
So you're looking to buy an existing duplex
Correct.
and renovating it.
And renovating it, yeah, and I think as Mr. Wiley was pointing out,
Mhm.
you know, the ones that are in better shape, obviously, are selling for more, sometimes considerably more. Whereas some of the ones that are lower price, they need some more.
Because the timing matters, because we don't get credit for these housing equivalency points until the certificate of occupancy is issued. So you'd want it to be built and issued in time for our next moratorium, which is April 1st, 2029.
Right, so, and that's why we're targeting the existing, plus remember, there's the restriction that the affordable restriction on 250 cannot be released until it's placed on, the units here.
So I'm reading,
Because what we didn't want to happen was that there would be a gap that you would have to deal with. And
so the restriction gets placed on the land records for the other duplex
for the other duplex at the same time, so the town has no.
before you get a C of O on this project. That's what this said, before the first unit has a C of O on this project.
Right, well, they're already established, so I think you would automatically get credit the minute regardless of even if there needed to be repairs done, I think you would get credit right away because it would be on it.
But you have to. Oh, because it's already built.
Because it's already built. Correct.
So the renovation would
Right.
not affect the housing equivalency points for our next 830G moratorium.
No.
After we're renovating it. Okay, well, that's good.
Commissioner Levy.
Just one last question. Are you contemplating buying one or two families?
1, 2 family.
It would only be about $1.5 million.
Again, it depends on the thing, but yeah, it could range from, $1.5 million if it was both sides, right? Yeah, and
Can I help with this, Matt?
sure, yeah. Felix,
Come on up, say your name and.
because I was gonna respond to that as well. So I feel like you do it more, so you got to identify yourself and say, yeah. I was just gonna.
I'm Felix Charney. I live at 360 Mine Hill Road, a resident of Fairfield. My office is in Southport. We operate a small farm up on Mine Hill Road. I've been doing this for a little while. This is my 45th or 46th year in development. I've built 105 buildings representing 8 million square feet, over 85 in Connecticut, the rest are in Florida or in Westchester. I've built affordable housing in Chappaqua, Greenwich, Darien, Norwalk, and Westport, where currently I have 159 units under construction. Not one of my affordable housing projects was in a for sale product. Mr. Levy, to help you with your math, so it will cost me $1 million each to build a unit, 250 Pequot, so that's $2 million. And I sell them for $2 million. So that is a profit of $2 million. But if I were to go out and buy the multifamily homes that we were discussing, whether it's $1 million or $1.5 million, there's the delta, if you will. I know I'm a developer and I'm preceded by 5,000 other developers who are just filled with greed. And I know you won't believe me, but affordable housing does not work in for sale product for the reasons that Chris mentioned. Because of the HOA and the common area charges.
if you put a family that paid $300,000 for a unit next to a family who paid $2 million for a unit, and they only have 2 votes on the HOA and there's 16 other votes, and the other folks decide they want to change all the Oriental rugs or whatever it is they want to do, and trust me, they want to do it, these folks have no choice but to follow along. And essentially that you've created, one of the elements of 830G is to create affordable housing spread through the community. So there isn't this sense of segregation or isolation. And the problem with it for sale in a very small project is this becomes the issue. You've got 2 neighbors who have a completely different agenda than the rest of the neighbors. And that is really what's behind all of this. Because the common area charges in this building are going to be close to $1,500 a month. Because these residents are going to want a concierge and things of this nature. And so this is a solution. Whether I make an extra $1 million or lose $1 million, that's really not the agenda. And I know you may not accept that as genuine, but it is. I've built 7 buildings in Southport, 3 other buildings in Fairfield. I've built your Whole Foods on a brownfield. We consider ourselves a tasteful and established, incredible developer. I will be doing other things here. The last thing I want to do is appear to be disingenuous. So this regulation is a solution to solve a housing crisis for folks who need affordable housing as we go forward. Because of the cost of land, because it's so limited, more folks like me are going to be building for sale because it won't work under for rent. And I think that's why Chris's regulation was ultimately adopted.
I have just one other point or question. My recollection is from the 8-30G statute, the house has to have been built after 1989 to get points.
That I don't know.
So that's, yeah, because there's 2 ratios in the statute. One is your 10% ratio, which makes you exempt. That doesn't have that restriction. But I believe
Before then?
I-
or was
yeah,
it
I believe
built before then?
to get points, it has to be, because the
Chair?
moratorium is a give back to communities that add housing. So if you added housing since 1989, when the law was passed, that's how you get points. So I would just double check on that.
Well, but I think
I might have
it's going to help us here.
Well, I would just defer to our Community and Economic Development Director, Mark Barnhart, who's in the
Mark, we
Called
audience.
early.
And, you know, they put together our moratorium application package. So I don't know if Mark, if you're willing to just kind of speak to that comment real quick.
Sorry, Mark.
Sorry.
No, this is good to clarify this. Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development. To your point, you're correct. There's a 1990, but it has to be newly created or newly deed restricted after that date.
It did restrict.
So it just has to be deed restricted after.
Oh.
You're right, though. It does need if it's being built, you have to have a certificate of occupancy in order.
Didn't something happen with like the Pine Tree, the ones that we renovated, we lost points because they were built before?
They were built, there
was
was
a-
a net. So there were existing units.
Okay.
And we only added a net of 14 beyond that.
So if these duplexes they're buying were constructed before 1990, that's okay because the deed restriction is
They
coming in
weren't
after.
restricted previously, so now they will be
Okay.
count for.
That's good. Thank you. That's good clarification.
Really.
Yeah, just following up on our math.
Oh.
And believe me, I don't question your commitment and it's a beautiful project. I was on the commission when it was approved. I've driven by it, it's gonna work out well. But when this came before us and Chris submitted it, of course, at that point, we approved it because it's 100% absolutely discretionary as to whether or not we go with the in lieu of. And of course, and I think I raised it at the time, that to my mind, one of the advantages of affordable housing is also to have people of various economic levels being able to intermingle, live together, understand each other, and get the benefits of a diverse community. And, I stand by my math that if you have 2 units that you can sell for 2 million each, regardless of what it cost you, whether $1 million each, you will have 4 million in your pocket. If you sell them,
I had to build them.
I know, but you will have at the time of the sale, when title passes, you'll get 2 million from one, 2 million from another,
The bank will have taken,
regardless. But the sales price is 2 million each. It's 4 million coming in, your profit is 2 million, right?
do you lend money?
That's it.
I could borrow from you.
But if you sell them at 350,000 each, you will have a loss because you'll have paid 2 million and then you'll get 700,000. The net delta is 3,300,000, right?
The net delta is 1,300,000.
Now, the delta between what you get selling them at market rate and what you get selling them at a a subsidized rate is 3,300,000, 2 and 2, or 350 and 350. You're gonna, it's a difference of 3,300,000.
All things in life have a cost of goods.
I'm not talking about
Whether
that. I'm just talking about if you're asking this commission to improve and in lieu of, and it's gonna have to be comparable.
it's
Right?
comparable to what?
It's gonna be comparable to 3,300,000 or somewhere in that neighborhood. Otherwise, you're gonna sell them at 350 each.
Maybe somebody else can help with
Well,
one.
and
That's just my thoughts.
Well,
That's not what our regulation
I mean, the
calls
other
for.
alternative is you can limit, and I raised it at the time, that the common charges on the affordable units could be prorated just as the purchase price. And essentially, the other 16 unit owners will in effect subsidize the lower income affordable units. And that would cost a lot less than 3,300,000 over the next
Well,
40 years.
And one, I think that creates a situation, and these are a lot of similar arguments that obviously we had when
We
we
had
did
these
the
arguments
the
before.
amendment. And I think if the amendment was a win for the town and a win for the affordable unit owner and a loss for the developer, it probably would have passed many months and years before. But the issue is it then creates, we're talking about being equal within the development. It ends up creating an inequality because you have people who are subsidizing then the two affordable unit owners. And I think the thing, when I argued this before before the commission is, I think we have to look past and look at the fact that in the end, this is a benefit to the affordable unit owners and it's a benefit to the town as far as the HUE points. I know that's a small portion to look at with it, but I think it's also a benefit to the affordable unit owners. Not because I agree with your sentiment of having the, it would be nice to have people of different incomes, but I think when you look at the trap and the difficulty that those affordable unit owners could get into at a development like 250 Pequot, I mean, I think that's just a serious negative to them. And danger to them.
Commissioner, one second, Commissioner Randolph and then Capozzi.
Oh, so you had to say it first.
Okay.
Good.
I wasn't here as a commissioner when this first came before, but just so I'm understanding properly, there will be a development at 250 Pequot Avenue that will be developed at I'm assuming a very first class standard. You mentioned a concierge. And then the solution is to buy existing units elsewhere. Is there first question is there a distance requirement between?
It was left vague for this reason. I think that, to say it has to be within a certain specific distance, it could block potential other sites that may still be suitable. And then I think, again, if you look at the market, there's a lot more in Tungus Hill and that area, which I think are great locations and are options that we can therefore bring to you because there's some discretion in the reg.
And what other amenities will be at 250 Pequot Avenue other than the concierge that you mentioned, a gym?
It's a very small property and that's one of the issues here. This is only an 18-unit project where these two affordable units will stand out, if you will. It's not a large project where things would be spread out, but the other amenities are really insignificant. There's a little meeting room. It's a small project. It's under construction. She's coming out of the ground as you speak.
Would the affordable units have access to any of the amenities in the?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
if they were-
they would, absolutely.
And final question, would the affordable units be built to the same standard as 250 Pequot?
Yes.
Would they be comparable? in
Within reason, because many of the homeowners at this particular level want to go ahead and do a lot of customization in terms
Oh,
of.
sure, but the.
But the base-
baseline-
Yeah, the baseline is, all the units are essentially the same.
Right, and Commissioner, I'm glad you brought that up too, because that was another part of the discussion. because 250 Pequot is gonna be a luxury building. It's gonna have some high-end finishes. If an affordable unit owner moved in and acquired that piece, and then 5 years down the line, those finishes need replacement. Okay, maybe the affordable unit owner is now able to afford that and they can replace it, but if they are not, or let's say they do, let's say they go ahead, they're trying to keep it the same as it is. The issue is for those unit owners, they do not recoup that. It's not like for the market rate unit owners, if I go in and I put all the, well, no, I got, but,
Sub-Zero refrigerators, they're $22,000.
Right.
Oh, I know.
So let's say a market rate owner puts in that upgrade. When they go to sell it, they're selling it for more because they put in these upgrades and, you know, maybe they've improved it as time's gone on. The affordable unit owner cannot do that. They are still restricted. So even if, let's say they got in and they came, you know, they had 50,000 that came available to them and they put it in the unit, they are not then able to charge $50,000 more. And so it's a difficult situation, I think, for them in the long term to keep up with the upkeep of those units.
So
Right.
I'm sorry, I would just add that to ask you to think about this in the context of the next series of applications of this nature. So this is a somewhat unique, super high-end project in a very, specific part of Southport Village. But you are going to see more for sale projects in this community that are going to have the affordable obligations that are set forth by this commission. This is the first one. We got the regulation approved and we're trying to figure out how to navigate through it, despite Mr. Levy and I disagreeing on math. And I think that this is something that the town needs to think about in terms of these units and how to accomplish your goal, which is providing as many affordable units as possible.
I just want to say for the record, I really do appreciate both of you coming here and having this conversation with us because as you said, this is a new thing and we're working through this together. So thank you for answering our question.
Well, and just so you know, Fairfield's not the only one who does this. There's other towns accept units in lieu. So we're not the first on this one.
So I guess the question that we're all struggling with is equivalency. The intent of this ordinance was to create affordable units that were equivalent to the market rate units. Now, your proposal and location is a very important factor in real estate values. Back to Mr. Levy's math. The value of market rate for 2 units, Southport is $4 million, correct? Market rate for 2 units in Tungus Hill, keeping the math simple, is 1.5. Right, max. So that's the discrepancy that we're struggling with. And that discrepancy is a reflection of the quality of the location, right? Because one location is worth 2 million and one location is worth $750,000. That's what we're struggling with. Now, can that be made up through amenities? I don't think so. Can it be made up with location to the train? I don't think so. Can it be made up with finishes? I don't think so. That's what we're struggling with. So when we passed this, because I was here, and I know your project very well, I've been watching it. I ride my bike past there 2-3 times a week. When we passed this, the intent was to keep affordable units that were equivalent to the market rate units. And your proposal, I'm not convinced accomplishes that because you're putting, and the economics of it reflect that. You've got $4 million worth of market rate units versus 1.5 max of market units. And that's the struggle. Now, that's my point. But also one of the things we're struggling with, and it's to speak to you, is I don't see anything online here. I don't think we got the documentation for any of this. And it's very confusing to us. And this is a difficult topic. So if you could make sure Scouts, for your Boy Scouts honor, please give us the information beforehand so we can understand these things, okay?
You're talking about the listings?
What's online. What you showed us.
And I could submit that in. Yeah, and just.
Wait. It's not here. So either they made a mistake or you made a mistake. So make sure there's no mistakes because this is a complicated issue. And if you want us to understand things for your client, provide us the information because this is complicated and I don't have enough information. We read the stuff beforehand and we don't have anything to go on. You're explaining it to us, you're showing us charts. I don't have anything here in front of me. You make it harder, so.
If
Yes,
if I,
yes,
if I
please.
also
Go ahead.
could, through you, Mr. Chair, is I think part of what we are understanding as part of this is just how fast the marketplace is, right? And so even in the time that we scheduled to be able to come before the commission, there were properties that were already gone. So I think that's a practical reality of this alternative. And if I could just provide a parameter for the commission, I think what Attorney Russo is asking for, as well as Mr. Charney, is what are the acceptable parameters for them to pursue purchasing? Because when we've talked through this, the applicant and the applicant's representative, there is almost not enough time to be able to schedule a session with the commission for a property that they'd like to purchase without losing that property. So I think they're asking for what would the commission find to be acceptable? I do think that, you know, if we can kind of more deeply explain the habitat relationship, these are kind of units that end up getting sold to affordable households in perpetuity, right, Mark? Like if we look at the Greenfield Street model, the first sale is to a deed restricted household. The next sale kind of goes back to habitat and then it gets deed restricted again. So those are units that stay deed restricted in perpetuity. It's not just a 40-year limitation. So, you know, there are things that we can think about in terms of HUEs, housing unit equivalencies, HUEs, or we can think about what this does for Fairfield in perpetuity as units that will continue to be deed restricted outside of the 40-year restriction.
I'm sorry, I would tell you about my first conversation with Habitat, which is where this started, and Emmeline and Mark and I have had a lot of conversations, so we've tried to navigate how this is going to work. So I knew I had the obligation, so I started to figure out what should I go buy, but I needed to figure out who do I give them to, and nobody could really answer that. Did the town want them? Does the housing association want them? So Chris suggested I get together with Habitat. I called them up and, you know, they were obviously happy to have someone who's going to contribute to them. And they said, well, how quickly can you move? I said, well, we have cash and we can buy something right away. And they said, great. We have two families that are all ready to go and they just lost their house. There's a place over on, I forgot that cut through road by the old Bed and Bath there, whatever that street's called. Sorry about mine. And so I went over there and they had side by side, two family houses, and I made an offer and they accepted my offer, cash, closed quickly, subject to the approval of the town. And they rejected it. And so there was no way to transact. They would not accept a transaction. That's before I even knew what you would take or not take. But I said, Habitat wanted them, they picked them out. So then we said, well, do you have other houses that you want? He said, yeah, we have a whole bunch of them. Would you just go buy them? And I said, yes, I want to fulfill my obligation, but I still need someone to tell me what I'm allowed to buy. And that's really the genesis of this conversation. Mr. Randolph, I don't have my glasses on, and I'm old. Mr. Levy, where I disagree with your math, you started your comment about how much money I was going to make. And I don't disagree. We're going to sell 2 units for $4 million. And we're going to go buy a unit for $1.5 million. But when I sell 2 units for $4 million, I do not make $4 million. And that was the implication, that I was perpetuating a potential $3.5 million shell game. So this is really not about money. And you will not believe me because of what I do for a career. It is about families living in an environment where they can prosper and not feel ostracized. And affordable housing doesn't work in for sale product for that reason, unless it's just 1 or 2 units.
I think there's also something to be said for, well, so how many bedrooms are each of these units?
In 250, they're 2 bedrooms.
They're 2 bedrooms. So And how many parking spaces are with the,
Two per person,
is there any outdoor space?
virtually none.
And how big are the units square footage wise?
Range. It's 1,800 square feet to I think 20.
Yeah, yes, about 1,800.
Yep.
So I think it's important that, if you were looking at multifamily, that they're usually bigger than 2 bedrooms. They're usually 3 or 4 bedrooms in the duplexes. There's
Yeah.
also a garage that is their own garage versus a shared underground garage space. They also get backyard space. They get a place to put their dog. There's other benefits to owning a duplex, which feels more like a single family house than it does a condo, elevated with elevator, et cetera. So I think there's other benefits to the resident of the duplex that building, even though it'll be beautiful and even though we'll have, significant HOA, I think there's a client for that. Find them, but I do agree with you, the cost to carry it with the HOA, and regardless of how much money people have, they still complain about the HOA. There are other benefits to owning the duplex, so I think that should be factored in, because there might be more bedrooms, they'll have a backyard, they can have a dog, and a lot of these
Sure.
HOAs restrict size of dog, et
Health
cetera.
Observations, Habitat and Humanity also asked me, well, would you just go buy a 4-bedroom house? I said, yeah, I mean, I'll buy whatever I'm told I'm allowed to buy within reason. This isn't like a conversation with my wife. And so they have this huge list of people, of families that are ready to move in. I have this family who'd like a 4-bedroom house, or they would like this, or they would like that. And I said, fine, how perfect would that be for all of us to figure out? But I need you folks to kind of settle on direction.
Well, let me just say, I think, and Attorney Russo should remember this, this is something that we discussed over the many meetings. So this is not, we've given some direction just in the deliberations. So this is not starting from scratch. And I think part of what we talked about, I don't know, remember if it was Commissioner Randolph or Capozzi who talked about distance. I think that was something we had considered, right? And we had ultimately decided not to include a distance requirement in the regulation, in part because it was a bit too restrictive and it didn't give us enough flexibility, but the intent remained, despite not including a distance requirement in the regulations, that there should be consideration about distance. We didn't want to lock ourselves into a distance requirement, but there is a big difference between Tungus Hill, which is a great neighborhood, but the market rate is inherently lower than in a place like Southport. And so preserving affordability in a neighborhood that is already more affordable is important, but it's also important to give people an opportunity to live in a neighborhood they wouldn't otherwise be able to live in. And that was a big part of the discussion. So this is not new. And there was that guidance. I feel like I think I don't want to speak for the entire commission, but there was pretty broad sentiment to that effect that is a consideration and part of, and so, yes, I understand the math and the argument was well taken at the time. And I think now about the challenges of the HOA fees and all the other things you talked about with regard to below market rate units in this particular development, but it doesn't negate the discussion about the importance of trying to find something. We don't want to developers are building below market rate units in Tungus Hill and in other more naturally occurring affordable neighborhoods. We also need to create affordable homes in neighborhoods that aren't already naturally affordable. And so I don't want that to get lost in this. That was part of the discussion and there was pretty clear direction, I thought, at the time, to that effect.
Yeah, well, and Chairman, just to respond to that, so yes, definitely that was obviously a part of the discussion, but we had not kicked off. I think everybody knew 250 Pequot was the thing that was in mind, but we hadn't had specific discussions about 250 Pequot and then also looking into the market at the time. And so that's what we're here for is really, it's a unique, it's really not a public hearing application or anything like that. It's just for guidance. And that's why we're coming to talk to you about that and show you what the market is right now, what's available on the market, and get your feedback on how you feel about that, seeing what's out there. And, you know, to Ms. Harrigan's point, you know, the market's moving fast. So Commissioner Randolph, we've been reviewing properties with zoning and set those in. But as Ms. Harrigan's saying, they move so quickly, they're off. I mean, some of these might be gone by the time we're done with the meeting. They're moving so fast. So it's just moving very, very fast. And so that's why we're just trying to talk about this project specifically. So hone in on that more and get some guidance from the commission and
We'll take that as guidance from me, obviously, other
Yeah.
commissioners, other, is Commissioner Braun.
Okay, so I have 2 points. The first one is I was there during those deliberations. I do not agree with my fellow commissioners, and we had a different commission then. There are different people on the commission. The discussion was wide ranging. I felt this should have been all ownership, but we allowed it to be rent or ownership for the alternate off-site units. And what you're offering is ownership. You're offering home ownership to people that can't afford homes. That is a huge win for the town, not just for housing equivalency points, but also to provide a diversity of housing. That would not be done if you can't do it. So my concern is if we make this regulation futile or unable to be carried out, what's the point of having it? So if no one's gonna build an 18 unit because because they can't do it, you're not gonna get that. And you're also not gonna get the too affordable that we would be getting. So I have a different opinion from some of my commissioners here. And I agree with Commissioner Monahan. There's other benefits that are not factored into the money. Okay, it's not about money. It's about, are we gonna provide a diversity of housing? Are we gonna provide ownership? We're becoming a rental community. All these new laws in Hartford that are coming down, it's all about rental. Everything's rental, rental, rental. So this is ownership, both in the high-end one and in the duplex. And we need more of that. We need to give people the chance to own property in our town. So I'm completely, I support what you're saying. And what was my other point? Can't remember. Well, the thing about the timing also concerns me. So those houses that were listed up there, the duplexes, it looked like some of those might have been on the affordable list, but maybe not. You just want to make sure they're not, obviously, because
they're not already.
you want to make sure they don't already be restricted. Otherwise, we don't get any points for that. So I guess, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Randolph.
Okay, so in a perfect world, you would bring a proposed acquisition in, and it would be over the desk, a ministerial in a perfect world.
In a
In a
perfect
perfect
world,
world.
you would give me a box, you know, to fit it in this box, whether that addresses your distance issues or Mr. Levy's math issues or anything else of that nature, at least give me some tools to work with. And then if we fit in the box, you would basically allow someone to check the box that we need a synonym for box.
Yeah.
We would let the staff go ahead and say that fits, go ahead and buy it.
Staff approval would be. so
Yes, sir.
Back to Commissioner Monahan's suggestion. If there were a rubric, a criteria, so.
Better word.
Pardon?
Better word.
Yeah, rubric, yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
better educated.
So if there were a systematic way of evaluating, so your units are gonna be 2 bedrooms, 2,200 feet.
18 to 22.
18 to 2,200 feet. So if a unit were significantly larger, it would get more points, more score higher. You then look at location, but if you had a systematic criteria, you might be able to compare apples and oranges.
A criteria would help. How systematic and how specific it would be into the free market gets a little bit of a challenge. Most of these 2-family homes are being bought by investors. They're usually, Andrew, if I'm wrong here, they're mostly all cash purchases. The 2-family homes that on Reef Road, of which there were plenty, they've all been bought up and now being leased off. So they just go like that.
No, but I'm saying if there was a grading criteria for an option, and in a perfect world, you bring that grading criteria, staff would look at it and they'd say, approved.
Yeah,
I mean, that would be ideal, correct?
It would be helpful.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to look at it, though.
May
No,
I?
But I'm saying that the criteria would
You
have to
might-
be.
You might want to, and I apologize, incorporate some of Habitat Humanity's thinking, because they have the customer. This is not an abstract idea. They have this long list of people, mostly are families. And they'll just flat out tell you, I've got a family with 3 kids and I need this or that or the other thing. And they'll even to a certain degree say, Felix, can you go get that house on that street? And it's completely outside your criteria because it's outside the box. We hadn't thought about that. Oh, he's gonna buy a single family home and designate the whole thing as affordable. There's lots of solutions to this. I think if we could somehow collaborate on it, I'm willing, I'm obligated, but I'm also willing to go ahead and do this. But I'm a little bit intimidated by how do I?
I think I just suggested if you created a scoring criteria, which is pretty well known in the industry. We've got 2 residential real estate experts here. Create a selection criteria, and then that way you could rate, location would have one weight, size would have another, finishes would have another, amenities, public transportation, and then you could score it. And then that way it solves the apples to oranges problem, which is inherently reflected in the market value. You know, you're talking about 4 million versus $1.5 million. That's on the balance sheet. That's you've got a $4 million asset versus, you know, $1.5 million asset. I'm not talking profitability. I'm talking about what hits the balance sheet, not debt. You know, so that inherently is going to have some discrepancy in it. So, but if you selected a, 2.5 decker, those classic wooden structure, triple deckers, and you said, well, that is maybe the equivalent of, I don't know, 1 unit, right? So because it's going to be sell for $750,000 for 3. So maybe we get 3 units for one of yours because it matches the criteria. Because it's just cash, right? Because.
Sorry, did you want to?
Well, I just wanted to offer, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of suggestions, but nothing as concrete for it this evening. And I'm just wondering whether we could schedule a follow-up with, you circle back around with Habitat. You end up coming with a criteria expressing the need. We can review it with our Director of Community and Economic Development, and then we bring it back to the commission. Because I think
That's fair. I don't think we're gonna get
Yeah.
resolutions
No, no,
this evening.
Start.
I got
So
one
Could I
last.
suggest, Emmeline, that maybe we ask Habitat to come with? Because they talk a little
That's what
bit
I would
more about
recommend.
who the end user is and
I don't know that they have to come before the commission, but at the very least, they could provide more documentation as to what their target household is, and therefore then what your target property is going to be. So it sounds to me, based on the conversation, that there is some good foundational guidance to the applicant, but they still want you to come back with that more fully articulated. And then they can review that and then give you marching orders.
go ahead.
Yeah, just along those lines, I've probably built or ran a crew for about 5 Habitat houses over the years. And, they're fairly standard. Kitchen, living room, 2-3 bedrooms. And they have a set price, which they calculate, which, if, for instance, if you have a church group that wants to fund a Habitat house, they expect you to raise X $100,000. So you might want to check with Habitat as to what is the expected to fund the Habitat house. And then it's simply a question of funding, perhaps, instead of, 1 or 2, it might be 4 Habitat houses. I mean, it's probably about 500,000
they
each.
suggested that as well. But that required, which I'm totally open to doing, just contributing money to them and then letting them go do their thing. But this is a tri-party or 4-party agreement that we're trying to work out here, something that is involved in an amendment that has an effect on other things that are going to come before you. The free market where we have to find these things, the 501c who's going to accept it, and then ultimately the end user is going to have it. There's a lot of moving pieces here, so.
I think let's say, I'll give Commissioner Monahan, the last word about it, because I think we're at this point, we understand the considerations. I think we can go in the direction that was suggested. You can put your heads together, come up with some criteria that should make this an easier, more predictable process in the future. But
I just wanted to know, duplexes versus single family homes. Was there like a reason you were picking more duplexes versus single family homes?
I was thinking of you, pardon me, you, the collective, you, the commission, in terms of how many points you're going to be able to honor. Although I've done a lot of affordable, I don't know how many points you get from a 4-bedroom house that all of a sudden accommodates this family versus 2-family houses and things of this nature that accommodates more than one. But it was Habitat who was saying, would you go buy this house or that house, some of which were not 2 families. So I'm looking for the guidance, and this is math discussion aside, it was helpful. I appreciate your time. So will you want, to be specific, you want us to come back with the criteria? Because it's.
And we'll talk, we'll in discussion with Emmeline and.
Sounded like Mr. Randolph had the criteria. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you for time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is an application to recommend to public hearing for 845 Mill Hill Terrace, a re-subdivision application of OHI asset in Southport LLC for 4 lots in a residence A zone. It's required on this. Can I have a motion, please? Commissioner Braun.
Move to refer it for a public hearing?
Thank you. Commissioner Braun moves to recommend to public hearing. Do I have a second? Commissioner Capozzi seconds. Further? Capozzi, anything? All right, all those in favor of the motion to recommend to public hearing, please raise your hand. Passes unanimously. Thank you. On to coastal site plan applications. Mr. Mullen will go through some staff recommendations associated with these. We'll start with the 391 Birch Street, a coastal site plan application of Peter and Jacqueline Katz for an in-ground swimming pool in residence A zone.
Good evening, members of the commission. Jonathan Mullen, Assistant Planning Director, Fairfield. Staff recommends the following conditions in approving the coastal area management plan. Number 1, soil erosion. Soil erosion and sedimentation controls shall be installed and maintained during the entirety of the construction project at the subject site. Number 2, the electrical connections for the pool equipment shall be waterproofed and the equipment secured to prevent damage to life and property during a flood event.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. I have a motion on the item. Commissioner Levy,
Move to approve, with just, I have one question as well.
with staff comments, with staff recommendations, right? Yeah, Commissioner Levy moves to approve with staff recommendations. Commissioner Braun? Commissioner Braun seconds. Thank you. Commissioner Levy.
Just one question. There was something about elevating pool equipment that need to be addressed, or is that already taken?
In the state letter.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so well, that's, yeah, the condition takes care of that recommendation.
Commissioner Braun.
I don't know if this is the same question, but on the DEP letter, it says the plan does not provide details of the location or elevation. That's the same question?
Yes.
Okay, so that's already been taken care of. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All those in favor of the motion to approve with staff recommendations, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Next is 944 Pequot Avenue, a coastal site plan application of Luke Adovazio and Marie Pomeroy for an in-ground swimming pool in a residence R3 zone. Mr. Mullen.
Yes, staff recommends the following conditions in approving this coastal area management plan project. Number 1, soil erosion and sedimentation control shall be installed and maintained during the entirety of the construction project at the subject site. Number 2, the equipment pad shall be elevated to the base flood elevation of 12 feet in accordance with FEMA regulations to prevent damage to life and property in a flood. And 3, the pool installer shall provide more specific information about the design of the pool beam to demonstrate that it will be sufficient to prevent the pool from becoming buoyant in a flood during a flood. I want to back up a little bit here on these conditions were put in. However, in the go up to the paragraph above, the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection comments were received on March 24th, which included conditions listed below. The applicant's pool contractor has confirmed that the pool will be installed in compliance with these conditions.
That's for this specific application.
Yes, and that, so we've gone these have all been discussed with the pool contractor and they will be adhered to.
Commissioner Mo.
I think it was discussed at the last meeting that in the event of a flood, these pools will not become buoyant. They'll actually fill with sediment and they become heavier. Is that not?
They will, yeah, they won't. When they're talking about the beam, they're talking about actually anchoring it into the ground. And that's what this pool, what the design of the pool is for.
Got it.
So the beam around the edge of the pool, that's one of the things along with the hydrostatic valve, pressure valve to relieve the water pressure underneath. So those two.
So they've answered the question that DEP raised also about, it was not clear which of the reinforcing beam designs were used, so that's all been taken care of.
Yes, so, yes, so the full contract, so the letter was received, and rather than having the DEP rewrite the letter, we went back and forth. I went and added that language that we've discussed with the pool contractor, the conditions of the state, and they provided additional information and confirmed that they're going to comply with these conditions.
Just let's get a motion on the table first, and then we can go to any other questions. Commissioner Randolph?
Oh, sure, I'll move it
Commissioner Randolph moves to approve with staff recommendations.
with staff recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Commissioner Braun seconds.
Yeah,
Did you have a question?
Just a clarification question. So, since this was so deeply discussed last week, who does the review of the engineering drawings?
TBZ staff does,
Okay.
and it gets sent up to the state DEP.
And so is that, I mean, we're seeing a lot of pool applications, and this is really related to last week's conversation. Do we have sufficient staff, or is that does it require extra services on our part?
Well,
The
we
higher-
rely on the design professionals to certify that the design is appropriate.
So we basically rely on their stamp drawings.
That's correct.
And so is there any benefit for us to hire a reviewing engineer to work on our behalf? It's just a theoretical.
Right now, we have no budget for that, so
But that would be passed on to the applicant.
I think it's too much of a time delay.
Okay.
For what is an in-ground pool in a zone where we permit them.
So we feel, and this is just a general question, so we feel like we've adequately reviewed this and it complies with all the state laws?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Braun, did you have
Yeah, no, I'm good.
any other questions? Comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve with staff recommendations, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Next is 347 Lally Boulevard, a coastal site plan application of Charles and Christine Moore for an in-ground swimming pool in residence R3 zone. Mr. Mullen.
Yes, staff recommends the following conditions in approval of this coastal area management project. Number one, the soil erosion and sedimentation control shall be installed and maintained during the entirety of the construction project at the subject site. Number two, the electrical connections for the pool equipment shall be waterproofed and the equipment secured to prevent damage to life and property during a flood event.
Thank you. I have a motion on the item. Commissioner Braun
Motion to approve.
with staff recommendations.
Yes.
Motion to approve staff recommendations. To have a second, Commissioner Capozzi seconds. Comments, questions?
I just wanted to point out that this is really far away from the ocean. I guess it's still in the,
It is, the coastal area management area is in places, it goes beyond the post road. So depending upon where you're located, but it is, a lot of the ones that I've been doing, when we do distance from Long Island Sound, we're in the thousands of feet.
when we do close to the tidal wetlands, I also like to hear from conservation because they do restored, this is nowhere near it, so it's not really relevant, but yeah.
They don't have jurisdiction
I
and
know they don't.
the
It's good to hear from
director has indicated that he doesn't, he's staying in his lane.
I'd like to hear from him.
I know.
Any other questions, comments? All right, all those in favor of the motion to approve with staff recommendations, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Next is 1080 South Pine Creek Road, coastal site plan application of Michael Salati for a one-story addition to a single-family residence in a residence R3 zone.
Staff recommends the following conditions in approval of this coastal area management project. Number one, the soil erosion and sedimentation controls shall be included on the site plan and installed and maintained during the entirety of the construction of the project at the subject site.
Thank you. Can I have a motion on the item? Commissioner Capozzi,
Motion to approve with staff recommendations.
thank you. Capozzi moves to approve staff recommendations. So I have a second. Commissioner Levy seconds. Questions, comments? Commissioner Levy? Nothing further. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion to approve with staff recommendations, please raise your hand. Passes unanimously. Next is 387 Birch Street, a coastal site plan application of Sand Dollar Holdings LLC to demolish an existing single-family residence and construct a FEMA-compliant single-family residence in a Residence A zone.
Staff recommends the following conditions in approving this coastal area management plan project. Number one, soil erosion and sedimentation controls shall be installed and maintained during the entirety of the construction project at the subject site.
Thank you. Motion on the item. Commissioner Capozzi,
Motion to approve with staff recommendations.
thank you. Commissioner Capozzi moves to approve staff recommendations. Can I have a second? Commissioner Braun seconds. Comments? Okay, Commissioner Braun.
Does this expand the footprint of the house? This is just rebuilding, this is not adding an addition, this is demoing and building a FEMA compliant single-family resident?
Yes, it is, I believe it's slightly larger. Let's see. It will result in a 3,271 square feet of impervious surface, for which the applicant has installed adequate subsurface stormwater drainage. I will add that some of the comments, or all the comments in the DEP letter, when we actually submitted the letter to the applicant and when they already have made the changes
Okay.
suggested to, or recommended by the state, to the floor plans and the site plan.
Any further comments? Those in favor of the motion to approve with staff recommendations, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Moving on to old business, 1249 South Pine Creek Road. We have a special exception and coastal site plan application by Scott Molnar of RTB Fairfield LLC for a demolition of an existing one-story single-family house and construction of a new two-story FEMA compliant single-family house in a floodplain district zone.
This project was brought forth as a coastal site plan review and a special exception, just to refresh your memories. This is located in the floodplain district, unlike many of our projects we've been doing, which are residence A or B. This requires a special exception because structures over 250 square feet are not permitted unless you get a special exception in which you can build a structure that complies with the R2 zoning district. The applicant has provided a site plan which is in compliance with the setbacks requirements for the R2 zoning district. And then we reviewed the CAM site plan not the last meeting, but the 24th. And I'll review the conditions of that. The staff recommends approval with the following conditions. Number one, the soil erosion and sedimentation controls shall be included on the site plan and installed and maintained during the entirety of the project. Two, the architectural drawings are coordinated to show louvered openings on the south side of the building. Number three, the elevations of the electrical panels, elevations of the electric panel and its access platform are shown on the architectural drawings to ensure the compliance with height regulations.
Mr. Mullen, I have a motion on the item. Commissioner Braun
Motion to approve.
with staff recommendations.
Yeah, with staff recommendations.
Thank you. Commissioner Braun moves to approve with staff recommendations. So I have a second. Commissioner Capozzi seconds. Commissioner Braun.
I just want to reconfirm all the DEP comments were dealt with. Okay.
They were.
Commissioner Capozzi,
No further comments.
any other comments? All right, all those in favor of the motion to approve the special exception and coastal site plan application with staff recommendations, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And now on to our public hearings. First is a zoning regulation amendment application by attorney Christopher Russo on behalf of 1477 Congress Street LLC for a proposed new section 10.19 age-restricted housing district within the designed residence district, permit an age-restricted multifamily development of no more than 5 dwelling units per acre on sites that are a minimum 1 acre and located within 1,500 feet of an on-ramp to the Merritt Parkway, provides proposed application requirements and site plan standards. Attorney Russo.
Chairman, members of the commission, Chris Russo, with Russo and Rizzo LLC, offices at 10 Sasko Hill Road, in Fairfield. Sorry, I'm just joining the meeting. I got backed off for some reason. John, if I can, I was gonna share. Hang on 1 second. Good. It's a slideshow that's the regulations, P O C D, and some of the maps and materials I submitted, but there are a couple extra maps I added at the end, so I will submit that, Commissioner Randolph, so you have that in the file. Okay. Share.
Explain the history of this because we already approved a project there, didn't we?
No, well, this is just a text amendment.
But do we approve of this type of project or a different project? We approved a 39,830 unit.
39830G at 14.
This would change it to something else, right?
This is just a text amendment for deed restricted housing.
At that level.
No, just a general text amendment that would require a zone change application for that property in the future.
But this would have,
If you approve this amendment, 0 properties would be approved for an ARHD. They would have to come to you for a zone change.
but this relates to that parcel, 1477 Congress.
That parcel would be eligible to apply for a zone change under this amendment.
So they have an 830G approved already by us for 39 units, right?
They have a text amendment.
I thought we
We
approved.
didn't approve a site plan there.
We did not approve a site plan. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And I didn't handle, I wasn't the attorney who handled
Okay.
it. That was
So
attorney.
this is a
Bowers.
different text amendment.
This is, well,
Okay.
correct, yes.
Very
But
good job.
just to be clear on it, because it's a good point. If this amendment were to be approved, no properties would be designated an ARHD yet, an age restricted housing district yet. You would have to submit a zone change application and you could approve it, you could deny it. That's legislative capacity. You're at your full discretion. So this,
1477 in this case is just the name of the LLC.
correct, and that is the applicant. 100%. Okay. So to start again, good evening, Chair, members of the commission, Chris Russo with Russo and Rizzo LLC, offices at 10 Sasko Hill Road, Fairfield, here on behalf of the applicant, 1477 Congress Street LLC. This application is for a text amendment to the zoning regulations to add section 10.19, which would establish an age-restricted housing district or ARHD within the designed residence district regulations. So it'd be like a subset within the DRD regulations. The purpose of the amendment is to focus and promote housing development specifically for age-restricted housing. And so exclusively age-restricted housing. I'll get to what the current regulations hold on that in a second. But first I wanted to discuss the POCD. The amendment is intended to address a housing need already identified in the POCD, and just prior comments that I've heard this commission make, at prior hearings. So the first section of the POCD discusses that the town has experienced an aging population over the past decade as the baby boomers reach retirement age. The POCD notes that this trend has led to an increased demand for downsizing options, such as smaller homes, townhouses, or retirement communities. This chart from the POCD demonstrates the explosion of population in this age range, specifically between 55 to 74, with the 55 to 59 age range increasing by over 60%. And again, this is for age restricted housing. That is persons that are 55 plus and over. At least one person in the family is 55 plus. So I would say the number of units to downsize to has certainly increased with recent developments that have been approved by this commission. But still, as noted is your POCD says 85% of housing units are, or at least for single unit. But while we're improving on graded percentage of multifamily, I think the diversity of downsizing options could increase. And I plan to get into what I'm talking about with diversity of downsizing options. The POCD highlights the missing middle housing which has gained national attention for its ability to better blend with single-family neighborhoods. And so that's kind of what we're focused on today, a subset of that, age-restricted housing, middle housing, in an area that we think helps it blend between the single-family neighborhoods and then some of the more denser neighborhoods that we see is south of it. But I'll get into the location in a little bit. The POCD notes that the lack of this type of downsizing housing option causes two problems. One, smaller households that are stuck in housing that is larger than they need. So they are paying for more housing and more cost than they need. But it also essentially gums up the works by not having it because there's more competition for mid-sized homes. Families that need larger homes for their growing families need those smaller downsizing households to move into smaller houses so they can then fill in the former housing. But if the housing stock and the options aren't there for downsizers, it creates a logjam, drives up competition for the available homes, and therefore raises prices. Next slide shows the stated, what's stated as a core goal of the plan, and that is that people of all, and stress on this, ages, creeds, races, incomes, and physical abilities or capabilities will have access to diverse and affordable housing options. So obviously with this, we're targeting age. That goal gets a bit more specific in detail in the future land use section of your POCD. We're discussing designed residence districts, which again is the envelope we're in with this amendment. The POCD states that this district overlay should provide flexibility in site design and housing construction, which will provide a variety of housing opportunities, including the encouragement of elderly and affordable housing. So that's exactly what we're trying to do today with this amendment. This type of housing being proposed is also noted for its benefit to the tax base in your POCD for several reasons, including it supports housing choice for all ranges of incomes, as well as additional choices for smaller households, such as age-restricted households. It's denser and therefore requires less infrastructure to support, which costs less to maintain on a per-person basis. And I think this benefit is specifically true for this amendment, particularly with regards to sewer infrastructure, which I'll discuss, because this amendment allows the option for this type of development to go onto septic. But then just noting the final benefit that's listed for this type of housing is that it has less of a school enrollment impact than single family housing, which again, considering this is for a 100% age restricted housing development, we particularly demonstrate that benefit. I'd also note that there's a section of the POCD that states that a goal of it is to reduce densities in the FEMA floodway. Obviously, DEEP has been mirroring that sentiment. Seen it on some of my recent applications down by the beach. So if we're reducing density in the large FEMA area, and I think if you're looking at this map, if you think, if we're reducing the density in the large FEMA area of the South, and if the regulations are severely restricting housing development in the septic areas in the north. This is a sewer map that shows where the connected sewer areas of town are. You can look at this map and see how we are, under the way the current regulations are, we're squeezing all this area, this density into an area that's essentially north of the Post Road, south of the Merritt, and basically east of Burr Street. I think we have the ability to spread some of that burden, and that this amendment seeks to do that. And getting back to the comment on infrastructure, the POCD talks a lot about strain on infrastructure. Sewer infrastructure is included in that. So if this increased housing density that we're seeing is only borne by properties connected to sewer, that system is just going to further get stressed. And this amendment allows for age-restricted development on septic systems, within a limited area, which I'll get into the area that this amendment would encompass. But I will say about septic systems, they're actually more environmentally friendly. They treat waste on site. They use natural bacteria-driven processes to do so. They require significant less energy and infrastructure because, again, it's treated on site. And I learned a lot about septic systems on a recent application I had in Monroe. We had a hydrologist who got into some detail about how septic systems significantly recharge the groundwater. And if you think about a sewer system, one of the things it can do is export water away from a watershed and from, it doesn't replenish the groundwater right there at the site. And so this example, we had a hydrogeologic assessment on this project in Monroe that was on septic. And they calculated that 85% of the water is put back into the groundwater system. So, that's a significant benefit of septic systems. So while septic is limited in the amount of development it can sustain, you can't put the same number of units on a septic development as you could a sewer development. It does have a lot of pluses in comparison to sewer. So for all these reasons, we believe this amendment is just directly addressing the concerns and goals of the POCD. So turning to the, sure.
Go back. I'm not sure what you're showing us. Is that?
Right, so yeah, sorry, this is one of the new maps I found. So this is from CT Deep's website. It is showing the connected sewer service area that they have for Fairfield. And so everything in blue, that's where the sewer line runs.
So I'm just trying to orient myself there. So you got Easton up top.
Easton up top, correct.
What's Easton?
I think they just repeated Easton twice.
So is it a reservoir there? I mean, what are we looking at here?
Well, you can see Fairfield here and you can see
Where's Southport Harbor?
Southport Harbor is right here. You can see Fairfield Beach, the point on Fairfield Beach there. And so you can see 95 is kind of the thicker white band. I have a zoomed in version, but
The white road in the middle where the blue almost ends, that's Bronson Road. And then you continue down up to the right, to Lake Hills, and you kind of go.
right. And so the top end, you can see Merritt, you can see the Merritt, which is again, the darker white line that's running across there.
So what's the big blotch up at the top there? That's not served. Is that Circle U?
The Greenfield Hill.
They'll use all the way down here.
Yeah, it's all the way, because this is the Merritt right here. That's the Merritt right up there. That's right.
F.
So what's the big blotch up top there?
Here, hold on.
Upper right.
That's
Yeah.
up Lake Hill.
Keep
Right
going.
here?
Yeah, right.
Up
Yeah,
toward-
this is Burr Street right here. Can you see my cursor?
Like Mohegan.
This is Burr Street
He's talking about up and.
and this is Merritt Parkway.
To the right, yeah. Keep going.
So the blue
What's
area
not
is
served?
sewer?
What's not served? What's the area never mind.
That's east of Burr Street, right here.
Reservoir, look at the reservoir in there. There's like
Point
Somebody said
Hill,
talking about up and to the right.
Dave Rockcliffe.
Sorry,
He's talking about up and to the right.
probably Lake Mohegan.
which is served, the one in blue. In blue is served.
Never mind.
And then over here, this is a reservoir right here. So like,
I know what you're saying.
You're saying this regulation would not require sewer
would not require sewer,
with 5 units per acre?
5 units per acre.
And
Isn't
then
that too much for septic?
It depends on the soils.
Depends on the soils, 100%.
And are you aware that, have you had a septic system?
Yeah, I'm on a septic system.
So the sewage goes into the.
Ground.
No, the sewer goes in, the septic system
Into the tank.
has an inflow and an outflow in the tank. And then the fluids, we'll call them fluids, leach out.
Leaching fields.
And over time, these fluids going into the ground aren't always absorbed, so that over time, the leaching fields die. And so you have to find another place to put, another septic system or a reserve.
Right. Yeah, so you're
So
required to
so
submit for. a
it's 5, is there any property in town that is 1 acre that has that number of properties on it?
Well, the properties where
On
we are
septic.
possibly looking to develop We've looked at the feasibility of possibly putting units on septic there. And that's all that's all part of the process. I think when somebody submits to you and they come to you with a specific site, they could submit materials to you and they would say, this is a soil analysis. There's good soils here. And they could show that and they could bear that and they could prove that to you. And they could submit expert reports to that. But that's the next step if this were approved. But right now, it's just looking at a text amendment that would
Why
allow
would-
somebody to be.
Why would we consider approving something if that we know may never be able to be built?
Well, I mean, I
don't
could
believe
submit a
there's soil.
septic feasibility. I mean, there are developments that are on septic.
that are
They're
running.
not sewer level as far as intensity and density. That's why this is less dense as far as units per acre that you usually allow.
And depending on the number of bedrooms is the amount of leaching that's required. So
Right.
we're not
So
even
bedrooms would
getting
play into it.
Bedrooms.
Yeah, bedrooms would play into it. So maybe maybe a property comes forth and they have suitable soils to do 3 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms. Maybe some come in and they're not, and it's only 1 or 2. So it will impact their bedroom count. It definitely factors into it.
Well, so it seems like there's 2 distinct issues. There's the age restricted development and the septic development.
Which is, well, it's a component of what the ARHD allows, yeah.
Okay, so
would allow.
my first question I have is, why do we need a text amendment isn't that sort of a function of an HOA that we've decided that our community is 55 plus? Why do we need a global text amendment to address that one query?
Because I think there's a need to, we're looking at, the POCD identifies that 55 plus housing is a target. And what I think this amendment does is it attracts the development of that specific type of
Why couldn't the
housing.
developer just say, I intend to build a subdivision that is an HOA, and one of the stipulations of the HOA is that it's 55 plus? Why do we need a global text amendment to the town's zoning regulations?
So yeah, a person who has a development could say, I'm gonna make it age restricted. I think what we've seen a lot is that there's a lot of townhome developments that have come before you. 204 Old Post Road, the one that we did at Sherman Court. And those townhome units don't have to restrict themselves to be able to sell. They are going to sell market rate, no problem.
Sure.
But I think
But
this
it's not-
amendment
but-
kind of cuts to the chase of, here's a 55 plus and it's only for 55 plus developments. And it opens an area that I think is suitable, and I'll get into the location.
No, I understand all that, but why do we need a global text amendment if I'm a developer and I decide this is an eligible location for me to build a multi-unit family development, and I decide that I want the HOA that I record with the town to stipulate that every unit sold, it has to be 55 plus. Why do we need a global text amendment to the town zoning regulations in order for a developer to make that decision and record that HOA requirement with the town already? Why do we need that global text amendment?
Because, and global makes it sound like we're saying this should go in the whole town, which is not what we're not. What we're
No, but it's changing.
Property
But
ownership.
it's opening an area and saying this is an appropriate area for this type of 55 plus development. And it's a different area, and I have a whole breakdown to show the properties that I think are eligible that would not be eligible for a DRD. So that is not available to this area, but under this text amendment, it would allow this type of development, not a traditional DRD, but this type of development. And I think will incentivize the development or these types of developments, because it's saying, here's this area, you can do a 55+ here, and then developers will and propose, come back and propose it to you.
Okay. Now my other question is about the septic system, assuming that this is all workable and we have a multi-unit septic system. I currently live on a septic system.
Mhm.
So when my sister comes to visit with her kids, I remind them, Megan,
Yes.
when it's time to flush something down the toilet, please don't do that. When we moved in, our contractor told us no flushable wipes because you'll find them in your lawn. And that could be problematic. My husband and I live in a home and we manage our septic system pretty well, I think. But what happens if I'm moving into a development where we have 6 units on one septic system and there's one careless party and all of a sudden I'm in an HOA situation where someone else, creates a massive problem that then affects all the units? Do you have a plan to address the how and the why of that?
Well, they would have to maintain the system, and it would obviously be the benefit of everybody that lives there for the system to be maintained. And,
Right, but like, for example, I lived in New York City in a building that had vented dryers, and we got a notice that said, please make sure you clean the lint trap of your vented dryers because it's a fire hazard. And I went down and asked the building superintendent, and I said, how much lint has to be in a vented dryer before it becomes a fire hazard? And his response to me, and I quote, is, this is why many people can't have nice things. So when you're relying on a multifamily development to maintain a sanitary mandatory function, how do you
honestly, I think it's a better situation because you have more people who are watching it. I mean, I live on a septic system.
Yes, so
And I could go and I could buy 4-ply toilet paper and just start shoving it down there, and it would ruin my septic system. And maybe I don't care. I don't have the money to fix it, or I don't want to fix it, and I don't want to deal with it, but it's my problem on a single family property on a septic. Now you're in a development where you have 6 people. And so your behavior is going to affect the others.
Right.
And so they're gonna be on top of you and on top of enforcing those types of things to make sure, because they don't want to, I mean, the system has to be fixed. So they're gonna want to make sure it's maintained properly. So I think in some ways, communal living like that actually increases the responsibility and kind of the diligence towards that type of thing. Just so you know, I was just warming up in my presentation. There's a lot more I was gonna go through that I think is gonna answer some of these questions, but yeah.
Just a couple of questions. So back to septic systems, there are absolutely means to do on-site sewage treatment. It's done frequently. But your comment about, I just asked that you check to say that a septic system is more environmentally advantageous than connection to sewer. Just wanted you to go back and give you the opportunity to check that. And then lastly, I think one of the overriding questions is, it would be good if, as you continue with your presentation, how you distinguish this between a DRD and, how this might not possibly fit into our existing DRD regulations. And then lastly, you have referred to our POCD. I don't know if you have if you can do this now or future presentation, but if you could tie back to the exact parts of the POCD, that would be helpful.
Yeah, it's in my narrative, I listed the page numbers that there should be references there to which page numbers I'm reviewing.
Well, that, Commissioner Braun, but then let's try to get, I don't even think you're really.
I think I'm like a
looking at
third
your-
into it.
Okay, your list of properties, it seems like you have 4 or 5 lists and then they whittled down to like 5 properties at the end, one of which is 1477 Congress Street. And that goes along with what your restrictions are about where it should be located. It has to be 1 acre, within 1,500 feet of a state highway, excluding the Merit. but within 1,500 of an on-ramp to the Merritt, I don't understand what that means. It sounds like you're detailing.
That's
just for
where
that
we're
one
getting.
property.
We're on the road, we're getting there, trust me.
Okay, so you'll get there.
I am getting there. So I just went through all the POCD, and how I think this ties to the POCD. So turning to the current regulations, because I think it's important to look at what the current regulations say. There is no dedicated age-restricted development regulation where all the units proposed are age-restricted. The regulations do define elderly family developments, which is defined as units to be occupied exclusively by elderly families consisting of one or more persons, one of whom is 55 years of age or over. But when you look at how elderly family developments are utilized in the regulations, it's mainly as a kicker to increase permitted standards. For instance, the regulation that I have up here, 10.6.2, this is within the DRD. And if says if you have a certain number of age restricted units, you basically get a density kicker. So it says in developments meeting that definition of an elderly family development, the maximum allowable dwelling unit density may be increased by 50%. Provided that at least 20% of the units shall be conveyed with the restrictions. And so then if you look further down, it's the same thing. It's a kicker that increases the density rather than just being if you provide 100% of the units as age restricted. And again, this is something we see around in other towns. They have specific age restricted regulations. The next slide that I show is 10.12. On this next slide, elderly family developments, they're a kicker to coverage. It allows you to go from 20 to 35%. But again, it's not really this amendment that's just dedicated to age restricted housing. So that's the kind of gap that we are looking to address. So going through the actual proposed amendment, in many ways, the proposed ARHD mirrors the DRD regulations. A lot of the standards are the same. But there are a few things that are more targeted towards age-restricted housing. So the first is that the use would be limited to residents for one or more families with dwelling units containing no more than 3 bedrooms. So it limits the numbers of bedrooms. This is mirroring what was discussed in the POCD, that this type of housing is for smaller households, downsizers. So it doesn't need to be 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms. They're looking for less house to manage, those folks. So putting a limit on the number of bedrooms, I think it's also important as far as septic. It's going to be tough to have a multifamily 4-bedroom development in a septic area. So it limits that. The use, again, requires to make sure it's age restricted, that one or more persons, one of whom is 55 years of age or over, live in the unit. And that is for every unit, which separates this amendment from the DRD. The next section of the amendment is density, lot area, and location, which again, I suspect most of our discussion will be. I'll go through the straightforward standards first. First, the potential ARHD properties must consist of at least 1 acre. That mirrors the minimum lot area requirement for a lot of the DRD properties. And the proposed density is 5 units per acre. So that density is well below the recently approved density for a DRD, which is essentially 12 units per acre. Few reasons, which we kind of already discussed, for that reduced density. First, when we talk about diversification of housing for the elderly, mainly we think about single family houses versus townhomes versus apartments, but I think it also includes the setting, and this would essentially allow a less dense DRD. I've done a number of age restricted developments, and they have generally been less dense than the developments that aren't restricted, because it appeals to elderly families who they're looking to reduce their space, but they don't want necessarily a drastic drop. Second, this amendment would potentially allow developments that would be serviced by septic. which typically handles less density. We talked about that. And the third reason is the proposed location. Again, this is middle housing that's proposing to blend from an area that's single family and as you get down past the merit. So 12 units is maybe not appropriate up in this particular area, but 5 units, something less dense is more appropriate. So that brings me to the location portion of this amendment, which I'm going to try to break down step by step. The amendment limits the area. Well, the slide is, which is a plan I submitted. Limits the area for an ARHD for parcels fully within, and stressing that language, fully within, to make sure we understand the properties that would be involved. It's fully within 1,500 feet of a state highway and within 1,500 feet of an on-ramp onto the Merritt Parkway. So kind of first, what is this excluding as far as location? I was here previously on a version of this amendment, and there was a lot of questions about the location because it seemed to encompass a large area. This is trimmed down and it excludes the areas around Post Road and the lower parts of Black Rock Turnpike and Easton Turnpike. State roads, but they're not included in this. And frankly, it's not really necessary in those areas because, as I showed with the sewer map, those are already locations where a DRD can go. And this is focusing on an area that's a little different than your typical DRD location. This restriction also excludes the area of Park Avenue around the Merritt. Why? One, Park Avenue is not a state highway. And two, the east side of Park Ave isn't even in Fairfield, and the west side is dominated by Notre Dame and Sacred Heart. So within that circumference of the on-ramp, there's frankly not a lot of options. So the areas for a possible ARHD is confined within essentially 1,500 feet of the Merritt Parkway ramps at Black Rock Turnpike and Easton Turnpike. Why is this area appropriate? One, it is a location that provides convenient access for its residents to one, a state highway that connects them into town. They have to be within 1,500 feet of it, and a major highway that connects them to Fairfield County, being the Merritt Parkway. And I also point out that this section requires the access for these developments to be from collector roads, which is the same as DRD. So it's not proposing it on roads that DRDs characteristically aren't typically allowed. It is still restricted that it has to be on a collector road. Two, again, when we're talking about why is this area appropriate, when we're talking about giving residents diverse housing options, I think the commission should also consider diverse locations. I know personally 55 plus residents who love the Anchorage in downtown. They love the convenience to restaurants, shows, and all that downtown has to offer. But that's not for everybody. Some people want to downsize, but not necessarily into a higher traffic area. And I think you could just see that within this area. If you look at Greenfield Hunt, Somerset, and Stratfield Falls that are in this area that do give a downsizing option. So I think this is an appropriate area for this type of kind of lesser dense of the middle housing and for this type of age restricted housing. So to go through the area that this would encompass. So I just pulled out some GIS maps. The 1,500 radius essentially goes above the Merritt here and reaches up to Greenfield Hunt. But within this, you have a lot of, there's the Hartford Healthcare, the Hi-Ho Motel, and then there's some properties that are under an acre that wouldn't qualify.
Unless you put them together.
Unless you put them together, correct, which would be possible. I'm going to go through the properties that currently would qualify, but there is the potential that somebody could come before you having put together two. South of Merritt, there's a lot that's owned by the state and the town of Fairfield. And there's also areas that are not on collector roads, so they would not qualify for this ARHD. But you do have the area of Congress Street up here, which is a collector road, and some of these properties will be eligible, and I'll get to those. This is north of the Merritt at Easton Turnpike. This is the east side of that. This is where the Somerset is. So this area is basically dominated by the Somerset before it turns into Easton. Oh wait, I went the other way. Okay. And then this is the area to the west of Easton Turnpike. It has a property that's eligible. I'll discuss that in a bit. But this is Congress Street right there. There's only a couple properties in this area that are eligible.
Where is that exactly?
So this is, if you were where my red cursor is where the highway convenience stop is. So
That's on Congress
if you-
Street?
if you- and so
Behind
this
Dunkin'
is,
Donuts?
this is Congress Street right here that is moving west towards the Hi-Ho.
So they're all on Congress Street, basically between the Park Avenue and Black Rock Turnpike.
Yes. Yes, but, and I'll get to the properties that qualify as right
Are
now.
there wetlands on those properties?
Some of them do.
Considerable.
Yep. Some of them have wetlands. This is the south side of Easton Turnpike. You can see Sacred Heart here. You can also see Stratfield Falls here. And then there's a lot that's, I believe, owned by the state, maybe the town. So that essentially dominates that area. So what I did was I looked at those properties that, again, are fully within the radius. And I pulled out the ones that currently are an acre or over. And so the first list that I submitted this, the first list has all those properties, and then the ones highlighted in red are town properties and state properties. So I removed those, and then I highlighted in this section, that trims down the list. I highlighted properties in that radius that are not on collector roads. So that further reduces, because these wouldn't be eligible for the ARHD. And I've just included on this your collector roadmap. You can see this is a zoomed in version. You can see right here is Congress Street, which is a collector road, as well as, obviously Black Rock Turnpike and Easton Turnpike. So with that, further trimmed down list, I then put in red here properties that are located along a sewer line, which would qualify them for a DRD. And they wouldn't necessarily need, this amendment to be our DRD. This is a zoomed in version of that earlier map along Black Rock Turnpike. You can see here, the sewer actually goes up a little bit, a ways up Black Rock Turnpike above Merritt Parkway. And it does actually go out onto Congress Street for a short stretch here. So some of those properties along Congress Street I excluded because they were along this sewer line.
1477? It just, I don't.
No,
see
so
this.
1477's up here. I'll show you a zoomed in map of 1477 in a little bit.
That doesn't look like it's on the sewer map on the POCD, but it must.
It's not on the sewer line. It's not on the sewer line, 1477. So when I took all those away, what I was left with these properties, 80 Congress, 1491, 1510, 1440, 1477, 1445. They're above an acre. They're on a collector road, and they are not located along a sewer line. So as of right now, these would be the ones that could come forward, that could not come forward as a DRD, but could come forward as an ARHD.
Because
So
DRD
minus what
requires
you're
sewer.
saying of the possibility that somebody could come in and join them. So focusing in on these properties, here is this section. You can see Hi-Ho's down there in the bottom left. There's these 4 properties that are above an acre along Congress Street, so they're on a collector. They could, if this amendment were approved, apply to you for the zone change. Then there's 445. Again, you can see the rest stop over here at the top now. It's a longer piece. It's actually listed as open space. I couldn't find the deed that restricts it, but the town lists it as open space. I think it might have been a private conveyance of open space. So that might have a restriction that would prevent it anyway. And then here's 80 Congress Street. You can see The Rams here, the convenience, rest stop is over here. This is 80 Congress Street. It's over an acre, but it is a church-owned property. It's right across from the Somerset. So this amendment only really expands this type of targeted residential development to a very limited area. That's what I was trying to demonstrate, with, going through, and trimming down to those remaining 5-6 properties. And it's a very specific amendment. It's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum of 830G, which is basically all over in any property that has access to sewer. It doesn't matter if it's on a collector road. This is more precise and carefully chosen location. Coming in under your regulations, which, I'm sure there's obviously a lot of people who would have liked to have handled the increase in the housing stock this way rather than 830G. And there's potential someone could come back to you at a later date, identify another area they think could be good for an ARHD and propose an amendment to the location. They can do the analysis on that location, but I don't think we have to approve an amendment that just has to be as broad as possible. Rome doesn't need to be built in a day. It's a limited incursion to see what types of age-restricted developments could be proposed. And again, by having this regulation in place, I think you're attracting somebody to come to you and say, here's this piece. This is how it's laid out. This is where the wetlands is. This is how the soils are there. This is its sight lines. Give you all the data that you would want to know. And what could we fit on here? Could it be 9 units? Could it be 14? It's going to be some form of a limited development because, again, it's on septic. It's going to be limited in the number of bedrooms. But it just allows somebody to come with an opportunity to come and present it to you.
Affordability requirement?
There is the affordability requirement is on there. And again, that it goes to my main point, which is that were this amendment to be approved, there are still 0 properties that have been designated as an ARHD. They'd have to come back to you for a zone change where you can review, and you'll see in the amendment, there's a bunch of requirements of what has to be submitted. A conceptual site plan, affordability plan, could be a septic feasibility plan, elevation drawings, conceptual elevation drawings. You could get all that in that section 10.19.4 that we put in the amendment.
Commissioner Capozzi?
Is this a sort of like field of dreams? If we build it, they will come kind of thing? Or do you have a developer? Or do you have a developer or developers
That would be interested, yes,
mind
100%.
that have come to you and said, if we could do this, we would do this?
Yeah. That's my client who, had me submit this application. They would come to you, the property they're looking for is 1477 Congress, to propose a age-restricted development. Again, limited because, it can't be a 25-unit development in this area. But we believe the site can handle increased density, and we've looked into that.
You explained so 5 units per acre, but if you have more acres, it would.
Right.
1477 is 1.7 acres. So how many units would that be allowed?
I think it's 9.
And what's the affordability? You're having 10%. Our DRD reg that we passed allowing 12 per acre has 15% affordable.
Oh, so,
Okay,
yeah,
10%.
actually, that might have changed since, so you could require it to be the same as your DRD then. You would have to revise the regulation that's submitted.
This,
That changed.
you wrote this after our DRD. Our DRD we passed a year.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I might have had it as, because I submitted this before, and so it
So
might
if
still
you
be.
have a 9 unit one, which would be allowed, right?
Well, but that wouldn't qualify because it's under 10. If it's over 10, then yes, 15%.
Oh, so no affordability would be required unless we had 10 units. Okay.
Unless 10, yeah, which is in accordance with,
But you're
I
saying.
can't remember the section that's where it talks
So
about.
you're not really clarifying that, I guess, but yeah, okay.
Commissioner Randolph?
So how would you distinguish between, and I'm just looking at the density standards for DRD, for an R2 zone, which is 2 acres, right? So it says An R2 zone, 2 acres.
I mean, AAA?
No, an R2 is 2 acre, the minimum size for an R2.
Oh, I'm sorry. You mean for DRD, to qualify for?
DRD, how is this different? Aren't you basically just saying we want to put a DRD in this area that is the same as a DRD for an R2?
Except there's no sewer at some of these properties, which
No,
would
but
be
I'm
a
just
DRD.
talking about density. Same density as an R2 DRD?
No, because it's 5 units per acre and a DRD in the R2
It says
would
one
be
dwelling
12
unit,
units.
one
So
dwelling
it could be up, if it's a minimum of 2, it would allow 24 units there.
So, one dwelling unit per the first 9,000 and additional dwelling unit for each 3,000. So
That comes out to 12, a little over 12 per acre.
12 for 2 acres. And so you're.
Well, 12 per acre.
Oh, so 24,
So 24 if it was a 2 acre
you're saying
development.
how many?
We're saying 5 units.
5 units.
So if it was 2, it'd be 10 obviously.
Okay, thanks.
There's just a couple other standards I just quickly wanted to go through. Off-street parking requirements provide 1 parking space for each 1-bedroom unit, 1.5 spaces for each 2 or more bedrooms, and visitor parking equal to 10% of the total number of units. That's actually more than your regulations require now because you have a special parking standard for elderly family developments that are over 3 units where it's only 1. So that's actually increased. But we think this area can accommodate that level of parking. Signage is the same as the rest of the regulations. The maximum height of any structure would be 40 feet, which is the AAA zone and AA zone. They allow 40 feet. Buildings would be required to step back 30 feet from the street line, 20 feet from any other property line. The maximum lot coverage is 20%. And the maximum floor area is 50%, which is consistent with the DRD standards.
Well, 10
And that's
feet from-
basically the amendment.
10 feet from a commercial, we changed the DRD to, didn't we? If it's bordering a commercial area, like on Stilson.
Yeah, well, you'd be able to reduce
Are
it
there
for a
any of these
DRD,
border
but there's
ones?
that one piece relevant here.
Commissioner Levy.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. Basically, the, senior housing and through the Fairfield Affordable Housing, that starts at age 62. Is there any reason you chose 55 here?
55 is what's in the reg for an elderly family development. I believe that is required under HOPA, which is I can't remember the acronym, but you're not allowed to discriminate in housing. There's an exception for age and that's through HOPA, which again, I can't remember what that stands for off the top of my head, but it allows it if a certain number of your units are 55 plus, you're allowed to quote unquote discriminate by age. So that's why I think that number is 55 plus in the regulations.
If it's 55 plus, 62 plus would also probably qualify.
Well, if you're 62, you would definitely
That's
qualify.
something we could consider. Also, for this market, which I would be in at 73, that would, wouldn't you think that a 2-bedroom max would be more appropriate? Most of the senior housing is either studios or 1-bedroom.
I can tell you the one that my client is contemplating, he's planning on 2 bedrooms. We put 3 bedrooms in. I think when it got into the site development portion of it, the bedroom count is very important to the septic. So I think that could end up realistically bringing it down to 2 bedrooms. We put it at 3. I have 3 kids. They were visiting me for Christmas. I'd put them in separate, so it gives people the option for it, but I think 2 bedrooms is fair.
And I think you should have at least 1 affordable unit per development, regardless of whether it's 10 or 4.
Got it. That it?
So, yeah, I mean, it's a dense thing to go through and it's a lot of talking. Essentially, again, we have for years now been trying to deal with this increased housing demand. And I think when you look at the fact that DEEP and your POCD are saying it shouldn't go in FEMA areas. And then we've had up until now this area that's on septic, which is a large area, that's basically been able to be like, we don't have to deal with increased density. I think there's an opportunity on a very limited basis. And that's what we're trying to do here, is just on a limited basis to have some of that density not just be borne by this one area of Fairfield and in this one portion of Fairfield. There are towns that are on septic in Connecticut that absolutely have more than single family developments on them. And I can find, I can work and I can find some examples of that to show that, something that's an acre plus, could support something like 5 units per acre. And I could submit this in. But again, I think it's a very limited incursion into this. If the commission looks at it and somebody comes in, it's a good project, and then somebody comes along and says, I think it's appropriate for this area as well, then the commission could consider expanding it. But I don't think every regulation necessarily has to be, we're gonna do the whole town, or we're gonna do this whole section. We can plan and target a specific area, see how it goes, see what comes before this commission. And again, if 5 people apply for a zone change for an ARHD, you could deny 5, you could deny 4, you could deny 3. It's totally at this commission's discretion. But we are, and I've seen in other towns, there is a desire for less dense age restricted developments. There has not been a ton of them. My understanding from talking to folks is, again, why restrict your market when the full market is eating up these units anyway? And so there's no reason to age restrict. So if we're going to get somebody who's really going to kind of cut to the chase, a developer is going to cut to the chase and provide age restricted housing, I think this amendment is going to incentivize to do that and to bring them to have them bring forward to you a small age restricted housing development, which is something I think, again, folks may want to go down, live at the Anchorage, but maybe they want to be still kind of in a less dense area, north of the Merritt. And I think this gives them an option.
Commissioner Monahan?
So when you say, you mentioned earlier, spreading the burden, what burden are you talking about?
Well, I just mean that there's this housing demand. And so that's why we've had, A30G applications, we've had DRD applications. And I think if you look at a map, it's been borne by, it's a large section, but one part, and there's been parts of Fairfield that just haven't had to deal with it all. I have not had an A30G, I'm on septic. I haven't had an A30G or some type of even slightly increased housing application, like a 3-family or a 4-family or a 5-family. There's been nothing around my
Because the
area.
lots are too expensive.
But there's nothing in the regulations that would allow it in that area. And so we're not saying like this amendment should apply to all of Greenfield Hill, the entire north end of Fairfield. But in this area that we have, that's
The
up there.
rationale is that. You're saying the rationale is that, but I'm just applying it to this little area right now. But your thinking behind it is exactly that.
But that when
Burden should be
these
shared.
were the problem with the old regulations, old zoning regulations. They were like, okay, here's this area and it's north of the Merritt and this is all single family 2-acre zones. And that's the only way even though there's a lot of nuance in this area, this is all that. I mean, frankly, I think it's one of the reasons we have A30G is because they were just so blanket uniform. Regs now are a lot more sophisticated in their planning. And then you can look at it and say, okay, north of the Merritt, a lot of areas not appropriate for higher density housing. But we do have this area that's in between 2 state highways. It's bookended by 2 state highways. And it's right on the Merritt. And that could be an appropriate place for not 12 units per acre, but something less dense, not for the entire population, but for age restricted. That can be somewhere where we could, it's a little unique, different from the others, that we could have some more increased housing. And it doesn't just have to be, it's got to be on sewers and it's got to be, in this area east of Burr Street, between
You're saying it doesn't have to be on sewers though.
But no, what I'm saying is it's not just as simple as it has to be on sewers and then so all these other areas are excluded. You know, this is providing, you know, again, an incursion into that area.
I think the problem
Slight.
is, this is basically Congress Street is it between Park Avenue and Black Rock Turnpike or between Sport Hill? Road?
Between Black Rock Turnpike and Easton Turnpike.
Doesn't go beyond there.
It doesn't.
That is where Mill River comes out of Easton Reservoir, like that is the headwaters of Mill River. It doesn't flow right through here.
Yes.
Seems like there's a lot of.
There's
wetlands.
some, yeah, there's some, and whoever comes forward, they have to do a zone change application. They also have to go to wetlands. And they have to show that their septic systems are not going to impact the wetlands. They don't get approved, doesn't go forward.
What's the setback from wetlands?
Hang on, I'm sorry.
There's a 100-foot regulated area.
One thing I will say is there are a lot of assuming that septic and assuming that, but one thing I do like about this proposal is that, you know, the Merritt Parkway, you know, between exit, I don't know the new exit numbers, but between the old exit 46 or even 47 to like
42.
well, beyond, all the way down to New Canaan and Greenwich at rush hour is like a disaster. It's a parking lot. So if you're going to build a multifamily development there, that would most definitely rely on that artery to get somewhere during rush hour. If you are a 55 plus, 62 plus community, odds are that housing is going to have a much less of an impact on that sort of very small but crucial artery, because people aren't going to be traveling. There's going to be a lot of retirees theoretically. So I think it is a good solution, provided that the other considerations are able to be met. So I think it is good thinking in that regard.
Thank you.
Any questions?
All right, are you all done with your presentation?
Yes, I think, you know, as far as satisfying the standards, I think it meets your comprehensive plan, your POCD. I think it serves public welfare, particularly with regarding, you know, providing a type of housing that is desired, and, you know, providing this downsizing option. And we think it fills a gap in the regulations. Again, a lot of towns have specific age restricted regulations. And so that's what we're trying to do here is to one that's really targeted.
All right, we'll close the initial presentation. We'll go to public comment. If there's anyone joining remotely who wishes to be heard on this item, please sign in and chat and indicate you want to speak. Doesn't look like there's anyone in this room. Is there someone online? Okay.
Green. Attorney Green. Yeah, is he online?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Breaking up a little bit. Try again.
Get text.
Can you hear me now?
That's better. Thank you.
Just for the record, Joel Green of the Law Offices of Green and Gross. I appear before you this evening remotely, and I apologize for that, but I had another commitment. On behalf of the Merritt Parkway Conservancy, I did submit an email to the commission late this afternoon. I don't know whether I doubt that that's made the record yet because it was late in the day. But it's the position of first of all, as you're aware from my previous appearances before the commission, the Merritt Parkway is dedicated to preserving the historic and natural character of the Merritt Parkway as it has for decades. And obviously there are concerns because really we went an awful long way for this applicant to really just pitch a zone change that pertains to 1477 Congress Street. Obviously, as we have shown on applications in the past, the development of this property is problematical because of its location and it backs up directly to the Merritt Parkway, and it is also positioned at the bottom of the hill and be highly visible, and we believe would, interrupt sort of the character of the parkway. In my email, I highlight certain ways that this really does not meet the POCD, and really, once again, we go an awful long way to craft an amendment or a text addition to the zoning regulations that really benefits 1477 Congress Street and limited other properties. I would suggest that it is not realistically and reasonably a goal of the POCD to have senior housing in an area that is really not well positioned or well designed to accommodate the needs of senior residents in any way. There's no walkability. As you all know, there's a high level of traffic in that area at rush hour. And when it's not rush hour, there's a pretty robust and fast path of traffic pulling through there. And I would think that when we think of senior housing, we would think of housing that has many of those features that this commission spends so much time talking about in terms of livability and usability for its target audience. Is the intention of the commission to hold this open for further analysis, or does the commission anticipate closing this evening?
I haven't heard any, I mean, it doesn't sound like we're awaiting any. I mean,
I think
I'd
there's
like to
one
see the
more
wetlands.
person who raised their hand.
I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah, Attorney Green, I mean, we have, sounds like there's at least one more person who's looking to speak. So I guess it's
All right.
possible we'll have additional after that, but I mean, we still have.
Mr. Russo was gonna give us some more information about something.
What were you planning to?
Well, I could look into providing, like looking at other denser developments on septic systems and provide information on that.
Into wetlands, like I'd like to hear about the proximity of this area of Congress Street to Mill River, the whole wetland system there, because part of Mill River comes out of Samp Mortar, which comes from Easton Reservoir, and part of it comes out of Cricker Brook, which comes from Hemlock Reservoir. So they all end up at Samp Mortar Dam, but that's part of, I think, where the headwaters goes through. So I would like to see some of that topography or.
Yeah, and I can submit that. I mean, again, I think a lot of this and what Attorney Green's speaking to as well is something that would be handled and considered when the zone change application came in. But I'm happy to see what I can do and find.
Because it only relates to like.
I also,
properties.
I got Attorney Green's letter while I was driving over to here. He likes to keep me on my toes. He's trying to age me into the age restricted development. So I haven't even responded
to him. I mean, I guess that's it's your discretion if you're going to respond to him. So if you're planning on responding to Attorney Green and submitting additional material, we can hold it open for that purpose. Well, hang on, Attorney Green, are you?
Well, if the commission is not inclined to hold it open, I would just make some other remarks. If the commission is inclined to hold it open, then I would look forward to appearing before the commission at your next meeting.
Well, I'd like to, we have 45 minutes left, so I don't, if we don't need to split, I'm sorry?
We also have one
I know
other
we
applicant.
also have that. So what other comments do you have?
I don't have the text amendment before me at the moment, but sort of as a matter of form and as you adopt regulations, if you really think about the way that Attorney Russo, the applicant, has pared this down to the applicable area versus the sort of the wording of this, talking about this 1,500-foot radius, and it sort of creates this, it's just very crudely written if you think about it, because when you think about that radius around, those entrances and exits at those two exchanges at Easton Turnpike and at Black Rock Turnpike, really, as Attorney Russo has demonstrated, that language is just superfluous because it truly doesn't pertain to properties in a 1,500-foot radius. And really, the regulation really needs a considerable amount of tightening up Because in reality, as he's demonstrated, it only applies to a handful of properties. And really, the properties on Congress Street, once again, I can't imagine under the POCD, and I highlight that in my email, or under any planning that I've ever heard this commission undertake, I have never heard the notion that it was an objective of this commission to sort of provide a more robust and more concentrated housing option on Congress Street. And so, look, I'll rest on these comments, and certainly you have my letter. But I would urge the commission to deny this application. I think in terms of satisfying the needs that Attorney Russo speaks to, I think there are sort of baby steps that this commission can take in terms of sort of fanning out from, I would say, more appropriate and perhaps more densely populated areas that provide better infrastructure for these kinds of developments. And I really, truly can't think of a reason why the way our town is, the infrastructure is created in our town, why you would begin with an amendment of this kind in an area on septic. I mean, that just makes no sense. And I would urge the commission to just take a close look at the wording of the text. And I think this just requires a real reworking. And I applaud the applicant in trying to create these housing options, but the motive, I think, is a bit off if it's just really targeted at this stretch of Congress Street. And as always, I want to thank the commission for your generous consideration and your patience in hearing me tonight.
Thank you, Attorney Green. Mr. Mullen, there was
We
at
have,
least one or two
John?
people.
Hello, you're
John,
you're
are you there?
unmuted. Okay, so I just got a comment from the, he's on his desktop without video, without audio, and video, so he.
If, well, we're gonna hold this
We're
open,
gonna- yeah,
so I guess if you have commentary, feel free to submit that in writing. We'll still accept it beyond this evening since the hearing will be open.
I think there was one other
And then
public
we do
comment.
have, Emily Howe.
That's out.
Hi, team. This has been so fun. This is Emily Howe. I've loved listening to all of this. Thank you to all of the commissioners and all of the presenters. I find it very interesting that 55 is the cutoff for this, and only one member of the household is required to be 55. So their spouse, their partner, adult children, they can be any age, and 3-bedroom units aren't downsizer units. That's family units with a label. So the argument that it won't impact traffic doesn't hold up. People at 55 are not retired. Younger household members will commute like anyone else. It was interesting how the presentation began with these 2 large circles, and if memory serves, there were 45 properties contained in them. But gee, it really winnowed down to 6 private properties, all on Congress Street, and the client in question wants 1477 Congress specifically. That's a zoning amendment written for 1 property, which is spot zoning. And I don't like the idea, frankly. And it's already been approved for a 39-unit development on the same parcel, although it's being appealed by the Merritt Parkway Conservancy, as Attorney Green mentioned. So instead of waiting for an appeal, the applicant's back with different packaging for the same property. I would also note that at 1.87 acres and 5 units per acre, it's 9 units, just under that 10-unit affordability threshold, as one of the commissioners pointed out. I don't love that element. It's certainly designed that way. The applicant told us tonight properties under 1 acre could be combined to qualify, and that's not a limitation. That's an invitation for land assembly in these neighborhoods. So I would urge the commission to deny this amendment or continue the hearing until these questions are fully addressed. I think that creating a new zoning category should come from comprehensive planning, not from a developer's application for a specific property. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else, Mr. Mullen?
No.
Okay, so Attorney Russo, you were going to submit the additional info on the septic in other places.
Other places. I think also, you know, in response to Leslie's comment, I'll submit the HOPA as well, so you can understand where that 55 plus comes from.
Can we get like a wetland, the town has like a
GIS map?
wetlands map because
The wetlands mapping, yeah.
even though there's a 100-foot upland review area, the commission can develop right up to the wetland if they want. So that's not a setback. That's just a review area for the conservation.
Yeah,
Commission.
which they could deny the application.
Well, they can deny it, but they could also allow it right up to Mill River if they want, you know?
And,
But it's-
and,
it's
and,
not
and
mine.
again, this is a repeating point I made, but
Yeah.
they're talking about it's an application for a specific property. You pass this amendment, every of those eligible properties could apply, and you could deny 1477 still. So you could apply all the other ones and not approve 1477. So there's no guarantee.
I don't
I'll
think
also
that
point
9
out
is
too.
Better than 39.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the other thing too, I mean, if you look at like Shelton zoning regulations, they do PDDs, planned development districts. Those are on one property. So this type of targeted to one property, I mean, that happens. They have regulations and amendments for one single property that are PDDs. So this is applying to multiple properties. I don't think every regulation has to be open to hundreds of 5,000. I think this commission can plan for specific areas like that.
I think it's great to have a regulation. I just worry about the location of the 6 properties, you know?
I got it.
It's
Commissioner
it's
Randall?
great to have more senior housing. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, when you provide the further information, if you could, I would be very curious as to how these multi-unit developments on a septic system have a safety situation to protect individual units from like a backup, or I just.
Yeah, what they have in there,
Science of
like,
that.
their condo docks, yeah. I got you.
Commissioner Randolph.
Yeah,
and then
so
Monroe.
related to that, am I correct in understanding you testified that, and I don't think, I mean, are you testifying as an expert that septic systems are safer than sewer systems?
In some instances, now you have to maintain them. That's 100% right. You have to maintain them, but they are environmentally friendly in certainly. And I mean, again, and this is from a hydrologist. I'll try to see if I can put something specific, but there's a lot of benefits to the fact that it recharges right there at the site, that it treats on site, that you don't need to construct and install a long sewer line to get to these properties. There's a lot of environmental benefits to septic
So
systems.
if you have, you made that point, if you have any documentation, the supporting material, just submit that with anything else that you're submitting, Commissioner Monahan.
And the 85% where you say it's put back into the groundwater.
Yeah, that was from the hydrologist report.
Yeah, I would like to see that report. Cool.
Okay, so we will hold this hearing open to the next meeting, and resume that.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
So, and we'll please get started on our last public hearing, which is a request by the Affordable Housing Committee to reorganize existing requirements and update standards pertaining to affordable inclusionary housing requirements in the new sections of our zoning regulations. Good evening, Mr. Barr.
Good evening. Books. I brought books. I can't remember.
Good to see you again.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Mark Barnhart, I'm the Director of Community Economic Development for the town of Fairfield. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Affordable Housing Committee. I'm joined by several members of the Affordable Housing Committee, Herb Cooler, the current chairman, Steve Brathwell, a longtime member of the commission, vice chair. So they're here to make sure I touch on all the points. Before you is a series of proposed amendments to your regulations. Briefly, they seek to establish a new section 15 and incorporate the various inclusionary zoning regulations that are found that relate to the provision of below market rate housing units in Fairfield that you can find throughout our regulations. The intent here is to incorporate that within this new section. And obviously, the purpose of that, I believe, is to streamline, our regulations for greater consistency and to eliminate any duplicative or redundant language that is within. I went through the process of actually tagging within our regulations all the various inclusionary zoning regulations, and that was the basis for our conversation with the Affordable Housing Committee, which has long considered, some proposals as it relates to these provisions. These are all important tools in our toolbox. They've helped us since they were enacted, create additional housing opportunities within Fairfield that grow our affordable housing inventory, and also resulted in points that we were then able to use to secure our first housing moratorium. We're hoping to continue that work with your help. Substantively, the proposed changes before you seek to increase the inclusionary zoning fee that was adopted by this commission back in 2018 from $5 per thousand of construction value to $6 per thousand of construction value. Mindful of the fact that you just went through a review of your own fee schedule. So we thought this would be appropriate to bring that before you as well. Also, the changes that we're looking for would reduce the threshold to which the inclusionary zoning provision apply from projects that result in a net increase of 10 or more units to those that result in a net increase of 5 or more units, which I think has some direct bearing on the application that was previously before you. Third, we're looking to increase the set-aside requirements townwide from the current 10% to 12%. And from 12% to 15% within the transit-oriented development and design resident district overlay. Fourth, we're looking to reduce the set-aside requirement for mixed-use projects within the center design business district from 20% to 15%. I think that's really largely to be consistent with similar provisions within the regulations as relates to these transit-oriented development or design overlay zones. Again, we congratulate the applicant who put forth that amendment and are certainly looking for additional affordable housing where we can find it. But we do have some concerns that perhaps 20% may be a bit more aggressive, and we'd like to be consistent across the line as it relates to these more dense mixed-use development projects. And fifth, I think, some language throughout the regulations that talk about the length of restrictions. Typically, there's a 40-year restriction in order to qualify for points for a housing moratorium. There's some language in our regulations that say that those restrictions will remain in full force and effect for as long as the building or development exists, but in no case less than 40 years. But that's not uniformly applied across the regulations. We'd like to make that the case. That would potentially extend the restriction period longer than 40 years, but obviously we do want to make sure that the 40 years is referenced in the regulations so that there's no question that this does qualify for housing unit equivalency points. All these proposed changes, I think, we believe are consistent with the strategy set forth in the town's most recently adopted affordable housing plan that the Affordable Housing Committee completed in 2022, as well as your own plan of conservation development. Thank you for your hard work on that changes. Overall, we think, again, enactment of these changes would be well served in public interest and bring benefits by continuing to harness the private marketplace to help the town meet its affordable housing goals. including, our pursuit of a second moratorium under Connecticut General Statutes 8-30G. Expanding housing opportunities to meet the needs of our residents, particularly those of more modest means, might otherwise be priced out of the local housing market. Thirdly, promoting a mixed income neighborhoods. As private development occurs, we think it's important to incorporate affordable or below market rated units within those. I'll pause there briefly, but I did want to touch on a couple things specifically as it relates to some of the proposed changes. One, I guess firstly, with regards to the inclusionary zoning fee that this commission adopted in 2018. I don't think it's any surprise that it's been 8 years. And during that time, prices have increased. So the buying power of $1 in 2018 is less than it is today. So we're partly seeking to mitigate that loss of purchasing power by proposing a modest increase in the fee by 20%. Inflation over that 8-year period, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, increased by more than 30%. So again, we think that's a reasonable increase to address this. The one thing I did want to point out that in drafting this, and we agree with staff's intent here, which is to try to consolidate all these various provisions that are sprinkled throughout our regulations in one section of our regulations, a new chapter 15. But in drafting that, I think there was inadvertent omission of some key provisions that are in 29.6.1, which we believe should be retained. Namely, the inclusionary zoning fee only applies to projects where they otherwise don't provide for affordable housing as part of their development. So there were some important exclusions for projects that otherwise contributed to our affordable housing inventory in other ways. So it does apply to new construction building additions, but we think it's important to exclude those projects that are contributing in other ways to our affordable housing inventory. I also do think it's important to provide the statutory reference there, so it does relate back to state statutes. So again, I think that was just an inadvertent omission in drafting this consolidated regulation for consideration. And the other thing I will add is that as it relates to the inclusionary zoning provisions themselves, this was done in 2015, where the commission felt appropriate to create an inclusionary zoning provision that applied townwide. Prior to that, you'd have a inclusionary zoning provision that applied to only that area within the transit-oriented development overlay district. It was 10%. The commission felt appropriate in 2015 to broaden that townwide to 10%. We think it's time to review that again, perhaps increase that at 12% townwide, and then look at within the TOD zone, which does allow for additional density, to increase that from 12 to 15. And that's based on 80% of the area median. We did look at some of our neighboring communities. A number of communities such as Ridgefield, New Canaan, and Darien do provide a threshold that starts at 5. Norwalk has a threshold that starts at 3, although it's a little funky because it applies to whether they pay into a housing trust fund of their own making. So, but they're covering other developments, smaller developments that are presently exempt from our requirement. Other communities, including those communities I just mentioned, Ridgefield, New Canaan, and Darien, all have set aside requirements of 14 to 15%. So again, we do think that we're somewhat in the neighborhood here, and we think it's supported by the record. I'll stop there and be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have at this time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Just so we don't have to have another public hearing, as I understand it, what had been 29.6.1, that is not, the intention is not to amend that or change that in any way, other than to change $5 to $6 and 10% to 12%. But the items that were omitted from 29.6.1 should be included in the new 15.2.
Correct. That's my intent. A recommendation, rather.
Couple of questions. Oh, couple of real quick ones. I think in the downtown center, when we passed that regulation last year, we required 20%.
That was
We
the
did.
change.
Did we change that already, or is this gonna change that to reduce it to?
We would
15?
propose, well, you
We
know,
have not- we have not-
That's still there, right?
it is still there. We think that, 20% may be rather aggressive. We're questioning whether or not that will actually be attainable, broadly speaking. We applaud the applicant that brought forth that amendment for his commitment to providing affordable housing units within that development. Certainly, if he wants to go above and beyond that and provide 20%, I think that's what the commission approved. We would expect that, and we would welcome that. But we do think that it should be consistent with other provisions that are similarly sized. So in our DRD or transit oriented development, we're nowhere close to 20%. We think 15% would be more reasonable and provide a balanced approach. And we think that, within the center design district as well, we should mirror that same language.
Also, could you explain points with accessory dwelling units? Because that's would this cover accessory dwelling units? Because there's a different way of doing the.
Not
I'm
yet.
sorry, not the points, the calculation, if we have ADUs that have affordability, a deed restriction. The time of the number of years is different, right? Than
ADUs can technically contribute points to housing moratorium application. They do need to be deed restricted for a period of 40 years. And
they do have to be 40. I thought it was like 10 years.
there's some conflicting language in the regulations which
Okay.
indicate that ADUs qualify for based on 10 years, but the actual provision that refers to the housing moratorium application doesn't provide a specific carve out. I don't know that your interpretation is unreasonable, but I don't think it's been adjudicated by any court as to whether or not, and in any case, we're not proposing any changes to ADUs as part of this amendment. We would like to come back before the commission and propose some changes to our accessory dwelling unit regulations, as well as our, perhaps to address the missing middle housing piece, look at our residence B and residence C zones as also outlined in your
Okay, thank
POCD.
you.
So
Yeah.
that'll be another application.
And I'm sorry, let me just say, Commissioners Churchill and Huntley, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to jump into. Commissioner Randolph.
Yes, thanks for your thorough presentation. You answered some of my initial questions on comparables for the percentages. I'm just struggling a little bit with 15(2)A, which says all applications for a zoning permit for any new construction or addition. So this is really staff as well. So when a zoning permit comes in, do you have a cost estimate? Or wouldn't that be don't you have the cost estimate of a building permit?
It is calculated by the building official, so there is some consistency with the application that is made for a building permit application, and they determine whether or not that valuation is reasonable.
So at the zoning permit,
Well, the zoning office does need to sign off on the building permit application, but the building official is the one that does the calculation. And then that money is remitted back to the trust fund.
so I'm just,
Money.
I'm just asking, so when you submit the zoning permit, you get a cost estimate?
We do.
Okay, all right, that was a process question. And then back to the 0.6%. Does that apply to all construction in town?
New construction, building additions only, and only
Commercial?
those that it excludes those that otherwise provide for affordable housing.
So commercial
Yes.
mixed use would be, okay. So,
Well, unless it has an inclusionary requirement that's applied to
If
it.
a mixed use development has a residential
Yeah, yeah.
component, they're already providing units, then no, it does not.
yeah, bowling alley, movie theater,
Correct.
that would apply, okay.
Or,
Not that we're building either one of
hockey
those.
arena or a basketball arena, those do apply.
So university properties as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, thanks.
Commissioner Monahan?
So when you're building an ADU, there's additional costs for those as well, like that's there are additional funds raised. for-
No, an ADU, unless it's a new construction.
If it's a new
but,
construction,
If it's new construction, like you're.
like a conversion of a
building new-
garage into a,
If you're renovating, no, I don't believe so. I'll defer to my colleagues, but I don't, unless it's expanding the footprint
I'm seeing a trend for people to want to convert their two-car garages into ADUs. So that was my question, where it was going.
If it's a,
It's kind of toward the affordable, so.
yeah, if it's a conversion, it's not gonna apply.
I would apply it to.
Should we exclude ADUs? I think it's a good point.
We could very clearly, explicitly, carve out ADUs if you felt.
I would do that.
Yeah, because it's an ADU where
Typically, a lot of the ADUs are, as you said, renovation or conversion of an existing space, so they don't apply typically. But I guess if you had a property, you could build a new detached unit, that would be new construction.
Right.
And so if it's not affordable, that potentially would apply. So, to your point, perhaps we should provide an additional exclusion for accessory dwelling.
Thank you.
Commissioner Capozzi.
The reason I would recommend, aside from affordability, that the ADU is excluded, to my understanding, the regulation shift to allow for sort of more sizable ADUs was spearheaded by an adult-oriented housing lobby initiative to allow parents to live on the same property as their children. So I do think, given that that was where that regulation came from, at least to the best of my understanding, it would be appropriate to exclude it from this fee
We
structure.
would not object to that.
other questions.
Anything further on your end?
Well, since Mr. Brenner is here, I have a question about. How many points do we need for the next moratorium?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. We're
3 years away, exactly, right?
So, we need 330 points. We have 267 points, roughly 81% of what
Towards
we need
that.
toward that. Not fully completed, but projects in construction that will, upon completion, yield those 267 points. So we do have a small gap, but we feel reasonably confident that we'll be able to close that gap based on projects that are approved, likely to start construction season. So we feel
The 280s on things that are underway.
267, it includes projects already completed, as well as those that are under construction currently. And
287 is projects approved in
Yeah.
process.
yeah, so I have,
Not
And
C
under
of O yet.
construction.
correct, not
When you
CFO.
say have, you don't mean we have the C of O.
No,
You mean
we
they're
have,
in progress.
yes. So bear with me one second. So I provided and I can share this with the commission, provided this is actually in our report to the RTM. So we have projects that are completed, which roughly, my math real quick, 69.75%, 69.75 points. And then we have another 197.25 under construction. Some of which are very close to being CO, for example, homes on 92-140 Bronson, very close to getting its CO. And there are other projects that are underway. There's certainly the possibility that things could go sideways, but less so when things actually are under construction. And that's why we do track things in terms of where they are in the pipeline, in terms of status. But again, projects that haven't yet started, that we anticipate starting, such as 730, 750 Commerce, we feel reasonably confident that as long as those projects are started
trademark
construction
one?
before the end of the year,
Yeah.
should be in very good shape.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
I tried to be
Planning
brief.
on speaking. No, okay. It's Mark speaking for all you. All right, well.
Is it okay? All right.
We'll close the initial presentation. If there's anyone joining us remotely, rather who wishes to be heard on this item, please sign in the chat and indicate you wish to speak. And we'll go to public comment. Have anyone raise their hand?
Can I ask you a question? Do you ever talk to the landlords of the buildings about finding people to rent who kind of fit into different categories and
Mark has conversations.
ever speak to the landlords to say, have you had any trouble finding the applicants? filling
We
the-
sometimes get rarely do we get calls from property managers or owners or landlords indicating they're having trouble leasing up an affordable unit or having trouble identifying appropriate tenants for those units. But when we do, we have connected them with other folks and they immediately get folks.
Great.
Yeah, because I get calls every looking for units. So, yeah,
That's why I
sometimes,
asked just in terms of
sometimes
like,
it's,
I don't know where to look. is
yeah,
what-
sometimes we have, and that's true. I think I get a lot of calls from people and the information is there, but you sometimes have to. So we try to get that information out and match people. And the inquiries that, the one that I can recall recently was somebody that was looking specifically for somebody, housing choice voucher tenant. And that was not, that was a very easy call to the housing authority and they immediately.
Right.
How do we enforce, how do we know that they're properly vetting out people to be meeting the affordability?
Well, we get compliance reports and we have the ability to audit those. So the compliance reports are submitted annually. They're submitted through Emmeline's office. They refer it over to us. We review them. We determine whether or not the tenants do meet the income requirements as well as the rents are compliant. And where we find discrepancies, we ask for clarification. In some cases, I can think of one example where we determined that they had charged tenants too much rent, overcharged, and we asked them to make an adjustment, which they did.
And how often do we do audits or?
You know, most of the folks, we haven't had the need to really, if something looks really out of place, we will go out and do that, but we're still staffing up to manage this. I do think that we want to do spot checks as this program ramps up. Not, again, most of the reports I see, and I think, and most of the conversations I've had, I believe that people are trying to do the right thing. Where we see issues, it's usually and we encourage people to call us. We've had a couple of those conversations where a property manager made the wrong interpretation. We try to bring him back and, you know, we're not trying to kick somebody out if he inadvertently leased a unit to somebody that was over income, but the next available unit would be the deed restricted affordable. So again, innocent mistakes sometimes do happen. It's rare, but again, my assessment is that people are trying to do the right thing as best they can.
And how about feedback, as more and more of these units are built? How about feedback from the tenants to make sure that the complaints they have, anything they're actually.
Yeah, I
is there
think
a
the.
system or is there going to be a
I
system?
think the
in
fair
place?
rent, which I also provide staff support to the Fair Rent Commission, does provide a check. So, you know, we can have fair rent complaints for deed restricted affordable units, and we've had. And, you know, the first conversation is typically, we ask the tenant to approach the landlord and see if they can work something out. But if that doesn't work, we'll have a conversation. We'll try to mediate something. And just because it says you can charge up to this amount and still be legally compliant, doesn't mean you can just increase somebody's rent by double digits if that person is on a fixed income and doesn't have the means to do that. I think they have a pretty good case for a fair rent complaint. So again, we try to talk that through with the landlord. Oftentimes they come up with something that works for both parties.
That's great. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Mullin, still no one? Okay, we will close public comment on that. Ms. Farmer, thank you.
Thanks for your update.
The
Thank you for all the
public
work
hearing
you're
and
doing.
adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.